Chapter 1205. Right now, Empress Feng Ye and Emperor Qian's expressions were ugly. They originally thought that destroying the Swallow dynasty would be a piece of cake. But who would have thought that the Swallow dynasty would receive help from the Sword dynasty? How is this possible? How is the Swallow dynasty related to the Sword dynasty? Emperor Qian's heart trembled. Empress Feng Ye's face tightened. She couldn't believe it either. How was the Swallow dynasty, which didn't even have a pseudo-saint expert, related to the Sword dynasty, the #1 dynasty in the 100 Great Dynasties? Not to mention them, even Yan He, Yan Chang'e, and the others were confused. They didn't know why the Sword dynasty would help the Swallow dynasty. Even a heavenly tribulation saint had made an appearance. However, Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Ye knew that they wouldn't be able to destroy the Swallow dynasty today. After this news spread, the Swallow dynasty's status and influence would skyrocket. After all, even the Sword dynasty had come out to protect the Swallow dynasty. One could imagine that no other dynasty would dare to humiliate the Swallow dynasty in the future. However, Empress Feng Ye wasn't willing to leave just like that. Sometimes, a woman's obsession was so deep. Seeing that Empress Feng Ye still wasn't willing to give up, Leng Qianhen's eyes darkened. Since he was here, he naturally had to help Yi Guchen protect the Swallow dynasty. Boom! Leng Qianhen raised his hand. He didn't even need to use his divine weapon. Instead, he used his fingers as a sword. A terrifying sword light swept across the sky, slashing toward Empress Feng Ye. Empress Feng Ye's expression changed. She felt a suffocating sword energy rushing toward her. She tried to block it, but she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her jade-like hands were cut by the sword energy. Mother! Princess Feng Shi's face was pale. She hurried forward and stood in front of Empress Feng Ye. Her beautiful eyes turned towards Yi Guchen, because she knew that the real mastermind was not Leng Qianhen, but the Sword dynasty's Jiankui. Lord Jiankui, I hope you can be magnanimous and let my mother go. Princess Feng Shi bowed to Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen sighed when he saw this. Who would have thought that the mysterious and noble young girl from back then would actually show such a humble attitude? This was the change brought about by status. However, on account of his friendship with Princess Feng Shi in the past, Yi Guchen wouldn't kill him. Yi Guchen directly transmitted his voice to Leng Qianhen. Leng Qianhen nodded and said, "You may leave. But remember, do not take a single step into the Swallow Cloud dynasty's territory or else." Leng Qianhen didn't finish his sentence, but everyone knew what the consequences would be. When retired Emperor Yan He heard this, his old face twitched slightly due to excitement. This sentence was the best guarantee for the Swallow Cloud dynasty's safety. After all, the one who had said that was a true saint. Empress Feng Ye had completely given up. She knew that she no longer had a chance. Emperor Qian let out a deep breath. His eyes were filled with resentment. What? You're not convinced? Leng Qianhen noticed Emperor Qian's gaze. His tone was cold. No, of course not. Emperor Qian lowered his head and gritted his teeth. 4 heavenly guards were killed, and one of his arms was cut off. As a false saint, the emperor of the Great Gan dynasty, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? However, he couldn't take revenge. He even had to lower his head and admit defeat. One could imagine how furious Emperor Qian was. It's all because of that Jiankui. Emperor Qian's heart was cold. If you don't have it, then get lost. Leng Qianhen's words shook heaven and earth. Millions of soldiers retreated. Their faces were pale, and their fighting spirit had long been exhausted. In the end, the armies of the Great Gan dynasty and Phoenix Nye dynasty retreated like the tide. Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Ye could only leave. A majestic war of annihilation ended in such a dramatic manner. Everyone in the Swallow Cloud dynasty's imperial family still felt like they were dreaming. They were all prepared to die, but they didn't expect such a turn of events. However, they all knew that the Swallow Cloud dynasty was only able to survive because of Jiankui. When they thought of this, Yan He, Yan Chang'e, Yan Balin, and Yan Wushuang all looked at the figure standing in the sky. Thank you, Sword Saint Guiyun and Jiankui of the Sword dynasty, for your help. Yan He cupped his hands at Yi Guchen. Yan Wushuang also bowed at Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen nodded and didn't say anything. Now wasn't the time to reveal his identity for a reunion. Yan Chang'e said, I wonder if we can have the honor of inviting Sword Saint Guyun and Jian Kuei for a reunion so that the Swallow Cloud dynasty can express our gratitude. Lung Qianhen shook his head and said, that won't be necessary. He didn't like crowds to begin with. This time, he had helped because of Yi Guqin. He actually had nothing to do with the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Everyone in the Swallow Cloud dynasty knew that Lung Qianhen couldn't have anything to do with them. Then, the only possibility was Jian Kuei. However, they couldn't figure out what the Sword Dynasty's Jian Kuei had to do with the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Many people looked at Mu Xingzu, thinking that it might be because of Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu didn't say anything because Yi Guqin had warned her not to say anything. Then, Yi Guqin didn't say a word and turned to leave. Just like when he came, he didn't ask for anything in return, nor did he ask the Swallow Cloud dynasty for anything in return. As expected of the sword leader of the first dynasty. A single tune of his zither caused 1,000,000 mighty soldiers to retreat, and he comes and goes as he pleases. How many people in the younger generation can compare to such bearing? Everyone in the Swallow capital sighed. In the next few days, the Swallow capital was decorated with lanterns and streamers to celebrate. Mu Xingzu also became a real VIP and received the best treatment. At night, outside the lively palace in the Swallow capital, Yan Wushuang walked out of the banquet with her slender and round legs to relax. The experience in the past few days was a bit of a roller coaster ride for her. At that moment, Yan Wushuang suddenly felt that someone was watching her. She took a step forward and walked gracefully. Who is it? Yan Wushuang shouted. She saw a figure standing on top of a fake mountain in front of her. He was wearing a black robe, and his black hair was fluttering in the night wind. He was wearing a ghost mask that seemed to be laughing and crying at the same time. Yan Wushuang's body froze as if she was struck by lightning. Have you been watching me in the dark for the past few days? Yan Wushuang's heart suddenly trembled. She didn't expect that the Sword Dynasty's Jian Kuei would be watching her in the dark. That figure was silent and didn't say a word. Yan Wushuang was so nervous that she almost stopped breathing because that figure was similar to the person she had been dreaming of. Is it you? Yan Wushuang's eyes were slightly hazy with tears, and the scene in front of her seemed to be blurry. That figure didn't say a word and disappeared into the night sky in a flash. Yan Wushuang's body trembled as she sat on the ground, feeling lost. On the other side, Yi Guqin slowly took off the ghost mask on his face in the sky where the moon was bright and the stars were few. Under the illumination of the moonlight, his handsome face revealed a hint of melancholy. Shuang, see you in the battlefield of the prodigies. Chapter 1206. The matter in the Yenyun dynasty had come to an end for the time being. This matter had also caused quite a stir. After all, for false saints had fallen, and even the Qian emperor had lost an arm. After the news spread, the Yenyun dynasty, an ordinary high-tier dynasty, became the most untouchable existence. After staying in the Yen capital for a few days, Mu Xingzu also bid farewell. Senior sister Yen, will you participate in the battle of the heavenly prides? Asked Mu Xingzu. Yes. Yan Wushuang nodded slightly. In the past year, her cultivation had not lagged behind, and she had reached the divine dwelling stage. Great, we'll meet again in the battle of the heavenly prides. There might be a surprise then. Mu Xingzu smiled. A surprise. Yan Wushuang shook her head slightly. Ever since Yi Guqin had disappeared after consuming the 9 deaths no regrets pill, there was nothing that could be considered a surprise to her. After leaving the Yen capital, Mu Xingzu and Yi Guqin met up. Are we really not going to meet Senior Sister Yen and the others? I feel that Senior Sister Yen has been very disappointed. Mu Xingzu hesitated. We'll meet again when it's time. Alright, let's go back. Yi Guqin waved his hand indifferently. They then boarded the flying boat and flew back to the Sword Dynasty. On the other side, in the palace of the great Qian dynasty, the Qian emperor sat on the dragon throne, and a group of princes and princesses of the great Qian dynasty knelt before him. At this moment, the princes and princesses were filled with righteous indignation and were criticizing Yi Guqin. Jian Kuei is too arrogant. He's just a cripple. That's right. His divine dwelling was destroyed by Huang Qianqiu of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion. What right does a cripple have to be arrogant? The princes and princesses all wanted to show off in front of the Qian Emperor. Enough. The Qian Emperor shouted coldly, silencing all the princes and princesses in the hall. I now announce that whoever can kill Jian Kuei in the Battle of the Heavenly Prides will be the Emperor of the Great Qian Dynasty. As soon as Emperor Qian finished speaking, the eyes of all the princes and princesses shone brightly. On the battlefield of geniuses, one's life and death depended on oneself. The forces behind one's back could not interfere. Moreover, the fact that Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty had his spiritual dwelling destroyed by Huang Qianqiu was no longer a secret. Many people knew about it. There were even people who mocked the Sword Dynasty for letting a cripple with a crippled divine dwelling take the position of Jian Kuei. Under these circumstances, the princes and princesses felt that they had a chance to eliminate Yi Guqin. Emperor Qian's eyes were filled with coldness. Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty, I will take your life as compensation for this arm of mine. On the Fengye dynasty's side, Princess Feng Shi was also summoned by Empress Fengye. Find a chance to kill that Jian Kuei on the battlefield of prodigies, Empress Fengye said coldly. But Princess Feng Shi hesitated, because in her opinion, Empress Fengye was being too paranoid. There are no buts. You don't have to worry about anything on the battlefield of prodigies. Jian Kuei is just a cripple with a crippled divine dwelling. Even if you don't kill him, someone else will, Empress Fengye said coldly. Princess Feng Shi sighed inwardly and nodded. Although the incident in the Swallow Cloud dynasty had caused a stir, it wasn't a big deal and soon died down. However, the Swallow Cloud dynasty's reputation had soared because of this incident. No other dynasty dared to provoke the Swallow Cloud dynasty. And after this matter had passed, another even bigger matter swept through the entire South Horizon region like a wildfire burning the plains. This major incident was naturally the opening of the Battlefield of Prodigies. The qualifiers for the Battlefield of Prodigies had started more than a year ago. The prodigies of the 100 great dynasties and various forces were all rubbing their fists and preparing for a big fight. It could be said that the Battlefield of Prodigies was the most dazzling stage in the South Horizon region. Only prodigies who performed well in the Battlefield of Prodigies were qualified to be taken in as disciples by the Overlord forces. All the prodigies wanted to join the Overlord forces no matter what. The reason was simple. The Overlord forces had a long history and controlled the richest resources in the South Horizon region. This was something that no dynasty could compare to. Even the Sword Dynasty, which was known as the #1 dynasty and the Holy Land of Sword Cultivators, couldn't compare with the Overlord forces. If a sword cultivator had to choose a place to cultivate the sword, he definitely wouldn't choose the Sword Dynasty. He would choose the Heavenly God Sword sect or one of the 4 sword pavilions. Of course, there was another more important reason. Becoming a disciple of an Overlord force would give one face and confidence. The reason why Gu Xiaoyang could be so arrogant and even Pei Tu didn't dare to go too far in the Mola dynasty was because he had the Starry Sword Pavilion behind him. The reason why Di Haoyan could do whatever he wanted and even destroy the Su family was because he had the Heavenly God Sword sect behind him. It could be said that an Overlord force was the biggest backer and the biggest deterrent. The reason why Yi Guqin wanted to join the Battlefield of Prodigies was because he needed a stable backer. Even though the Sword Dynasty was the #1 dynasty, it was still very stressful to deal with an Overlord force. Especially after Yi Guqin's identity was exposed. Because he had the immemorial demon sword, he would definitely attract a lot of attention. The Sword Dynasty couldn't protect him. Only an Overlord-level force would be able to intimidate his enemies and prevent them from doing as they pleased. On the way back to the Sword Dynasty, he was thinking about his future arrangements. Those forces that he had a grudge with or had enemies naturally couldn't join. This way, he eliminated the Heavenly God Sword sect, the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, and the Dongfang family. The Battle God Saber sect wasn't suitable for him. The Annihilation Demon sect could let Duguqiu Mo test the waters. The Misty Sword Pavilion had Yi Cangyue, which was a little troublesome. As for the Shimen clan, Nangong clan, Baiming clan, And other clans, they were bloodline clans after all. They were far less eager to recruit disciples than the sections. As for the three hidden forces, the one mountain, one sea, and one immortal valley, they didn't take the initiative to recruit, and they rarely recruited geniuses from the outside world, so they could be excluded for the time being. Moreover, Yiguchen had always had doubts about the Sword Clan of Sky Mountain. His relationship with the Sword Clan of Sky Mountain was a bit confusing. Therefore, Yiguchen would never consider getting in touch with the Sword Clan of Sky Mountain before confirming their relationship. Therefore, after such a selection, Yiguchen's only choice was the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion. Is the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion the only one left? I remember that it seems to be the sect that Jun Xiaoyao is from, Yiguchen muttered to himself. He still hadn't forgotten that handsome young man in white who was as elegant as a celestial being. While Jun Xiaoyao had only saved him once from Gu Xiaoyang, Yiguchen had never forgotten the favor he had done for him. However, I can't be sure yet. I don't know what the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion's attitude is. Yiguchen was very cautious. He couldn't choose to join the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion just because of Jun Xiaoyao. Moreover, plans couldn't keep up with changes. Who knew what would happen on the battlefield of geniuses? Chapter 1207. After returning to the Sword Dynasty, Yiguchen also began his final preparations for the battlefield of prodigies. Yiguchen's name would reappear in the eyes of the world on the battlefield of prodigies. Yiguchen, who had been forced into a corner in the Tianhuang Plains, would return with a towering rage and vengeance. When that time came, no one would dare to be high and mighty in front of Yiguchen. As time passed, the day of the battlefield of prodigies finally drew near. A storm was brewing in the entire South Horizon region as a great change occurred. The various sects, empires, and factions all began to take action. Their target was the sacred city of fortune at the edge of the sacred emperor world. On the eve of the sacred emperor world's opening, the sacred city of fortune was clearly the most lively place. For a time, the Nantian region was in turmoil. The Battle of Prodigies was about to begin on a majestic mountain peak in the War God dynasty. A group of people stood in a row. Among them, there were both men and women. Every one of them had a surging aura. However, two youths were the most eye-catching. One of them was a young man wearing platinum dragon-patterned armor. He was slender and handsome, and he held a golden spear in his hand. His aura was disdainful, and he was in high spirits. He was as vigorous as a white dragon, and his aura was vast. This was the son of the Heaven War Emperor, the first on the War God list, Zhao Shinkong. Zhao Shinkong was known as the Little War God in the War God dynasty. His cultivation was comparable to the prodigies of the Overlord forces. Beside him was a young man wearing tiger-patterned black gold armor. He was tall and powerful, and he carried a tiger-headed golden spear on his back. His aura was not much weaker than Zhao Shinkong's. However, this young man's face was gloomy and cold, and his eyes were filled with bone-deep killing intent. This young man was the second on the War God list. His name was Zhao Weihuang. Of course, he also had another identity. He was the son of the Earth War Emperor. The Earth War Emperor had been killed by the proud divine continent in the battle against the Sword Dynasty. Because of this, one could imagine how Zhao Weihuang felt. He held great hatred and resentment towards the Sword Dynasty. The person he hated the most was not the proud divine continent who had killed the Earth War Emperor, but Yiguchen. Because with his strength, he could not take revenge on the proud divine continent, so he could only vent his anger and hatred on Yiguchen. If not for Yiguchen saving the proud divine continent from the heavenless sword realm, it would have been impossible for the proud divine continent to have the chance to kill the Earth War Emperor. Therefore, Yiguchen was the main culprit behind the Earth War Emperor's death. This was Zhao Weihuang's idea. In addition, Yiguchen also knew some people in this group. For example, there was a 13-year-old girl who looked like she was carved out of jade. Her eyes were bright, and she had two ponytails behind her head. When she smiled, her small canine teeth would be revealed. She was Zhao Xiaodi, ranked 8th on the God of War list. She was also the daughter of the Heaven Battle Emperor and the younger sister of Zhao Shinkong. In addition, There was also the similarly gloomy and valiant young Marquis Zhongshan. His father, the heroic Martial Marquis, also died in the War of the Sword Dynasty. There was also the 10th battle on the God of War list, undefeated. It could be said that the top 10 geniuses on the God of War list were all gathered here. At this moment, a golden sun suddenly appeared in the sky, emitting endless rays of light. However, if one looked closely, they would see a majestic and blurry figure within the sun. That majestic figure exuded a powerful aura, and the space around him was faintly distorted. Seeing this figure, all the geniuses present bowed and cupped their fists. "Greetings, Your Majesty." All the geniuses said, "Greetings, Father." Zhao Shinkong and Zhao Xiaodi also said. The figure wrapped in the sun was the leader of the God of War dynasty, the Heaven Battle Emperor. His strength was not only at the Sage Realm, but also at the Sage King Realm. Otherwise, how could he have the qualifications to lead the second strongest dynasty? This emperor only has one request for going to the battlefield of geniuses. The Heaven Battle Emperor paused, then said, "The 13 sword princes of the Sword Dynasty are all dead." His cold words resounded through the heavens and earth. Everyone present was stunned. The Heaven Battle Emperor wanted to kill all 13 sword princes of the Sword Dynasty in the sacred imperial realm. Because of the special rules of the battlefield of geniuses, the forces behind the geniuses could not interfere with the life and death of the geniuses. Therefore, the battlefield of geniuses was the cruelest battlefield for the geniuses of the various forces to kill each other. "I will not disappoint Your Majesty," Zhao Weihuang shouted, his murderous intent clear. If there was anyone who hated the Sword Dynasty the most, it would be Zhao Weihuang. "Jinku Dubai, I, Zhao Weihuang, will personally take your head to appease my father's soul in heaven." Zhao Weihuang swore in his heart. Zhongshan and the other geniuses also had solemn expressions, their murderous intent surging. Zhao Shinkong did not have any deep-seated hatred for the Sword Dynasty, but he would do his best to carry out the Heaven Battle Emperor's orders. Among the geniuses present, only Zhao Xiaodi had a bitter expression, her eyes wide with worry. Because in the sacred imperial realm, she had traveled together with Yi Guqin. Although they were not very close, they could be considered acquaintances. However, when they met again in the battlefield of geniuses, it would probably be a battle to the death between the two dynasties. What should Xiaodi do then? Zhao Xiaodi frowned. At the same time, the geniuses on the sword ranking of the Tyrant Sword Dynasty also received orders to kill the Sword Dynasty's geniuses if possible. This was to take revenge for the previous battle. After all, the Tyrant Sword Dynasty had also lost a saint, Huotianxiong. The princes and princesses of the Great Qian Dynasty were rubbing their palms, ready to go. They were planning how to kill Jin Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. There was also the Phoenix Nye Dynasty. Princess Phoenix Dawn stood on a flying ship, her face filled with disappointment. Sword Dynasty. Jin Kuei? All the dynasties had targeted the Sword Dynasty. It could be said that the Sword Dynasty was targeted like never before. Many dynasties had designs on the Sword Dynasty, especially since the news of Yi Guqin's spiritual estate recovering hadn't spread. Thus, the outside world still thought that Yi Guqin's spiritual estate had been destroyed by Huang Qianqiu. How glorious was it to step on Jin Kuei of the First Dynasty. Thus, many people wanted to use Yi Guqin's identity as Jin Kuei to rise up and become famous in the South Sky region. There were many geniuses with such thoughts. Of course, the geniuses of the various dynasties were the main forces in the battlefield. However, the geniuses of the overlord forces were even more dazzling. Compared to the geniuses of the dynasties, the overlord forces were the true peak existences in the battlefield. In one of the 4 sword pavilions, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, a seclusion area, a clear whistle spread out in all directions, and the entire mountain valley trembled with a rumble. Many disciples of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion were alarmed and walked out to take a look. In the depths of the valley, purple light filled the air and illuminated the sky. A figure appeared out of nowhere, and his aura had reached the 8th heaven of the Divine Palace. Senior brother Huang Qianqiu has come out of seclusion. Tiskhi, senior brother Huang Qianqiu is one of the 4 emperors, the proud emperor, and he has the heaven-desolate war body. Even the strongest of the Sword Dynasty, Jinhui, had his spiritual estate destroyed by senior brother Huang Qianqiu. He lost all his cultivation and became a cripple. Many disciples of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion exclaimed in admiration. This time, Huang Qianqiu would definitely show off his invincible prowess in the prodigy battlefield and sweep through all 4 directions. Chapter 1208. Purple light burst into the sky, and the entire sky was filled with purple mist. Huang Qianqiu broke out of his cultivation in such a strange scene. His purple hair fluttered in the wind, and his purple eyes were filled with divine light. He was handsome, and his body was slender and strong like a real dragon. He had an intimidating aura about him, as if he was a deity who had just come out of his cultivation. Huang Qianqiu was one of the 4 sovereigns, and he was known as the Proud Sovereign. This represented Huang Qianqiu's personality. He was arrogant, domineering, and insufferably arrogant. His real opponents were only Di Haoyan and a few others. Senior brother Huang Qianqiu's aura is too strong. Once he uses the Tianhuang body, who can beat him? Many disciples of the Imperial Celestial Sword Pavilion exclaimed. Huang Qianqiu had the Tianhuang body, so his hair, eyes, and even his blood were all purple. This Tianhuang body was extremely powerful and domineering. The more he fought, the stronger he became. It was said that he was undefeatable. At this moment, Huang Qianqiu looked into the distance and mumbled to himself, "I, Huang Qianqiu, will climb to the top again in this battlefield of geniuses. And that's Sword Dynasty's Jiankui. If he shows up, I will definitely dig out his secrets." Huang Qianqiu had never forgotten about Yi Guchen's ultimate sword domain. If he could get his hands on such a powerful technique, Huang Qianqiu could challenge Di Haoyan's authority. In the Starfall Mountains where the Starry Sword Pavilion was located. In a valley, 4 streams of Zhen Qi shot up into the sky. In the sky, there were 4 stars twinkling. Soon after, 4 figures appeared. They were 4 young men in silver clothes. They looked similar. They were 4 brothers, known as the 4 young Star Lords. Each of them had an extraordinary bearing. The 4 of them were 4 of the 7 great bears of the Starry Sword Pavilion. They represented Dubhe, Tianxian, Fekta, and Migres. In addition, there was Gu Xiaoyang of the Mizar Star, Zhou Heng of the Alioth Star, and Song Yuyao of the Alcade Star, who had already passed away. Our goal this time is not only to get the opportunity to break through to the Venerable Realm in the Holy Emperor world, but more importantly, to deal with Jun Xiaoyao of the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion. Among the 4 people, a young man in the lead said coldly, "Of course. With the 4 of us working together, even Jun Xiaoyao wouldn't be able to escape. Moreover, we still have that trump card. It's enough to trap and kill Jun Xiaoyao in the Holy Imperial Realm." Another young man with a similar face sneered. "That's for the best. If we succeed, the status of us 4 brothers will definitely rise greatly, and will be on par with Gu Xiaoyang," said the 3rd youth with a smile. "That's true. Gu Xiaoyang is getting weaker and weaker. Recently, I heard that he couldn't even suppress the geniuses of the Molo dynasty. What a joke." The youngest young man shook his head and laughed. In the eyes of the geniuses from the overlord forces, the geniuses from the various dynasties were naturally inferior and were not worthy of their attention. It was indeed unexpected that Gu Xiaoyang couldn't suppress a dynasty's prodigy. No matter what, we 4 Star Lords will definitely make the Starry Sword Pavilion famous in the battlefield of prodigies this time. The eldest of the 4 brothers said with ambition in his eyes. In another place of seclusion in the Starfall Mountains, starlight flowed and an aura surged. Gu Xiaoyang, who was wearing a robe and a crown, came out of seclusion. There was a crack in between his eyebrows, and there seemed to be the change of the sun and the moon, as well as the fall of the stars. That was his special ability, the starry eyes. It contained all the stars in the sky and turned into an amazing ability. The battlefield of prodigies will be the stage where I, Gu Xiaoyang, will rise again and become famous. Those opponents will become my stepping stones. Gu Xiaoyang's eyes were filled with confidence and ambition. His starry eyes had reached a higher level, and his strength had increased greatly. Therefore, he was more confident. The Luo Fu Sword Pavilion was located in an ethereal fairyland. There was a pavilion on top of a picturesque peak with a serene scenery. There were two figures in the pavilion, a man and a woman. The woman was wearing a long green dress with tassels. She looked elegant. The man in front of her was wearing an elegant white robe. His face was as handsome as a fairy. His hair was like a knife, and his eyebrows were like ink. His face was like jade, and he looked very handsome. He was as ethereal as a fairy, and people would be fascinated just by looking at him. The woman in the green dress was tidying up the clothes of the handsome man in white. She looked worried and said, "Xiao Yao, you have to be careful of the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, and other forces in the battlefield of prodigies." "I know." The young man smiled gently. He was none other than the top genius of the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion, one of the top 10 young masters, Jun Xiaoyao. The woman in the green dress was his partner, Li Qing. Back in the Tianhuang plains of the Saint Origin dynasty, Jun Xiaoyao and Yi Guqin met for the first time. It was when he asked Yi Guqin to pick the superior 9-colored epiphyllum. That flower was the gift he wanted to give to Li Qing. Although there are many geniuses in the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion, there are very few who are truly top-notch. The Starry Sword Pavilion has the 7 Great Bears, and the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion has not only Huang Qianqiu, but also the geniuses on the Dragon Phoenix ranking, Chen Qingshao, and others. Li Qing looked worried. "Don't worry, Qing but it's still a pity for that person." Jun Xiaoyao seemed to have thought of something and shook his head slightly. Li Qing said, "You mean that person who took the God Devourer sword and severely injured the true dragon of Haotian in the Tianhuang Plains, Yi Guqin?" "That's right. It's a pity that Brother Yi died. He was a ruthless person who could take on Di Haotian head-on. If he could join the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion, the younger generation of the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion might not necessarily be suppressed." Jun Xiaoyao felt that it was a pity. But then again, there will definitely be many dark horses in the battle of geniuses this time. "Xiaoyao, you can choose to make friends with some of them and get them to join the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion," Li Qing said. "Of course, if we don't recruit some geniuses, the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion will be in trouble in the next sword conference of the 4 Directions Sword Pavilions." Jun Xiaoyao smiled faintly. After bidding farewell, Jun Xiaoyao stepped onto a white crane and soared into the clouds. In the era of great battles, geniuses compete. I have a feeling that the battle of geniuses this time will be very interesting. Jun Xiaoyao stood in the wind with his hands behind his back, like a deity riding on a crane. In a valley of the misty sword pavilion where moonlight shone, Yi Songyue, who was dressed in a white robe, had a powerful aura surging from her body. At some point, a ball of inextinguishable light spread out from her body. However, that was not all. Within the ball of light, one could vaguely see a beam of light condensing, bringing with it a sharp aura. Is this the embryonic form of a sword? Yi Songyue's expression froze, revealing a complicated and puzzled look. After that ridiculous incident between her and Dugu, Yi Songyue felt that the inextinguishable divine embryo in her body seemed to have undergone some kind of transformation. However, she did not expect that the embryonic form of a sword was gradually being nurtured within the inextinguishable divine embryo. Could it be? This is impossible. Suddenly, Yi Songyue thought of a possibility. She shook her head, her face pale, unable to believe it. Chapter 1209. This transformation made Yi Songyue think of a possibility. The innate indestructible sword embryo. This was a powerful technique that came from the fusion of the indestructible divine embryo and the innate sword embryo. The innate sword embryo was surrounded by chaotic aura and was extremely sharp and could destroy everything. The indestructible divine embryo was round and indestructible. It had powerful suppression, sealing, and defensive powers. The innate indestructible sword embryo combined the strengths of both. It had the destructive power of the innate sword embryo and the indestructible power of the indestructible divine embryo. It could be said to be a powerful technique. Yi Songyue also wanted to get this technique, but the price she had to pay was to give up her virginity. Yi Songyue couldn't make up her mind, so she didn't give Gu Xiaoyang a chance. But now, the thing in her body was the innate indestructible sword embryo. How is that possible? Dugu didn't have the innate sword embryo. Yi Songyue was confused. But suddenly she thought of another person. A person who was rumored to have died a long time ago and was almost forgotten by many. Yi Guqin. No, it's absolutely impossible for it to be Yi Guqin. He took the 9 deaths without regrets pellet and has already died. As for Dugu Qiuma, it's even more impossible for him to be Yi Guqin. That's simply too absurd. Dugu's seeking demon had triggered the 9 heavens vision of the demon emperor. He was very different from Yi Guqin in all aspects and couldn't be connected at all. Yi Songyue would never believe that Dugu's seeking demon was Yi Guqin. After thinking for a while, Yi Songyue still couldn't figure it out. Dugu's seeking demon? Yi Songyue's expression was complicated and cold. She had mixed feelings. She didn't expect the innate indestructible sword embryo to be obtained in such a ridiculous way. She looked in the direction of the sacred emperor world. If nothing went wrong, Dugu's seeking demon would also participate in the battlefield of geniuses. How should she face him then? In the Nantian region, the geniuses of the 4 sword pavilions were all ready to go. Even though not all the chosen ones would enter the Holy Emperor universe, it was still a feast to watch from the outside. Of course, the 4 cardinal sword pavilions were not the only ones taking action. One of the 3 great sects of the South Horizon region, the encampment of the demonic extermination sect. Dressed in a black dress, one was looking into the distance. She was charming and charming, like a peerless fairy. In the distant sky, there were 10 huge black demonic figures standing tall. The surrounding dark clouds were gloomy, and tens of thousands of ghosts were wailing. It was like the 18 layers of hell. To what extent has the Yama King's strength reached? Wan's eyes were filled with astonishment and solemnity. The Holy Yama was definitely a powerful and terrifying genius. The 10 enormous black demonic figures standing in the sky were the special phenomenon that he possessed, and they were called the 10 Yama Kings. This phenomenon was not much weaker than Dugu's demon emperor descending to the 9 heavens. In the demonic extermination sect, the Holy Yama could be said to be one of the most outstanding talents. He was also the most popular candidate for the position of young sect master of the demonic sect. He also had another identity. He was one of the 4 emperors of the 1 emperor and 4 emperors, the Hell Emperor, Proud Sovereign and Huang Qianqiu, the Hell Emperor and the Holy Yama. These people were the top existences of the younger generation in the South Horizon region. Few people could match them. Dugu, the battlefield of prodigies, is the only chance for you to catch up with these top prodigies. You have to grasp it well. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll become someone else's stepping stone, muttered to herself. Battle God Saber Sect. In front of a magnificent waterfall that was hundreds of feet high. A sloppily dressed young man with messy hair wielded a rusty ancient saber as he slashed at the 300 m tall waterfall. The saber light was so bright that it directly split the waterfall vertically and rolled back into the sky. This scene was extremely shocking. And this young man was unsurprisingly Gu Zun. Just then, a hearty voice rang out. Gu Zun, this should be your 10,000th swing of the saber. Not far away, a handsome young man in white with a long crystal saber on his back appeared. There was a hint of admiration on his face. This person was the genius of the Battle God Saber sect, Dao Woman. He was also one of the 10 young masters, young Master Fusheng. On the battlefield of prodigies, I'll kill whoever stands in my way. Gu Zun's tone was cold. It won't be difficult for you, who has comprehended a perfect and peerless saber move, Dao Wuming said with a faint smile. He had a premonition that the 10 young masters would have a great change in this battlefield of prodigies. Because there might be old young masters who would fall and new young masters who would rise. The leader of the 3 sects, the Heavenly God Sword sect. In a forbidden area with an array formation. More than 10 types of rare flames were constantly being refined. In the midst of the flames, a golden sword covered in crystals floated. Some of the crystals on the sword had melted and fallen off, but most of them were still in a sealed state. This sword was the self-titled Human Emperor's sword. Su Jianshi was sleeping in the Human Emperor's sword and had sealed herself. At the same time, another longsword that was emitting a bright golden light was also exerting power to wear down the Human Emperor's sword. It was the Heavenly Emperor's sword. On the side, Di Haoyan was sitting cross-legged on a futon. He was wearing a simple and loose white robe. His skin was as white as jade. His long golden hair was as bright as gold. His silver eyes were as deep as the sea and carried a kind of indifference. His appearance was also extremely handsome, and his entire body exuded a celestial sense of perfection. Di Haoyan was like a banished immortal. He sat cross-legged in the mortal world but did not belong to it. He had been in seclusion for more than a year. He had spared no effort for the Human Emperor's sword. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly flashed over from afar. It was a handsome young man. He was tall and straight and had the aura of a prodigy. There seemed to be endless sword chi flowing around him. Even his pitch-black eyes seemed to be overflowing with sword chi, cutting through the void. It was certain that he was an extremely powerful prodigy. He could be at the top of the South Horizon region. However, he was very respectful to Di Haoyan. He stepped forward and cupped his hands. "Senior brother Haoyan, the Saint Emperor world is about to open. Are you not going?" Di Haoyan's expression did not change. He said calmly, "The opportunities in the Saint Emperor world are useless to me. I can even reach the divine transcendence realm if I want to, let alone the venerable realm." Di Haoyan's tone was calm but domineering. He could reach the saint realm if he wanted to. "Senior brother Haoyan, you are indeed worthy of being called Senior brother Haoyan. Ordinary people like me can only look up to you." The handsome young man's eyes were filled with fanaticism. "You don't have to belittle yourself. As one of the top 10 young masters, young Master Xuanzhen has the King of Swords body. You can definitely take the lead in this trip to the Saint Emperor world," Di Haoyan said calmly. The handsome young man was called Chu Xuanzhen. He was also one of the top 10 young masters and was called Young Master Xuanzhen. His body constitution was the special King of Swords body. He was born with the heart of the sword and could control thousands of swords. Among the top 10 young masters, Chu Xuanzhen's strength was enough to rank in the top 5. That was how powerful the King of Swords body was. However, such a peerless genius was willing to submit to Di Haoyan. It showed how powerful Di Haoyan's strength was. It could be said that in the entire Nantian region, except for Yi Guchen, who had used the move of borrowing the sword from heaven to severely injure Di Haoyan at the risk of his life, no one among the younger generation had truly injured Di Haoyan. "Senior brother Haoyan, are you not going to participate in this battlefield of geniuses?" Chu Xuanzhen asked. "After that, I will go to Sky Burial Island," Di Haoyan said calmly. Sky Burial Island. Chu Xuanzhen was excited. Sky Burial Island was where the real battlefield of geniuses was. There would be the cruelest slaughter with the geniuses from the Dark World. The Saint Emperor world was just the prelude to the battlefield of geniuses. Chapter 12:10. The prodigy battlefield was about to begin. The entire Nantian region was in a state of turmoil. All the dynasties were on the move. The 3 major sects, the 4 sword pavilions, and the various aristocratic families were all ready. Countless prodigies were rubbing their fists, eager to show off their skills. Outside the imperial city of the Maluo dynasty, a large group of people was also ready to go. On the deck of a black floating warship, Dugu Qiuma stood with his hands behind his back. His long white hair fluttered in the air. His aura was like that of an unparalleled demon king. He was evil and domineering. Beside him, even Princess Luo Ho, who had always been ice-cold and fond of killing, felt her temperament being suppressed by him. At this moment, she was more like a real woman who was willing to submit to Dugu Qiuma. Because during this period, Princess Luo Ho had really been conquered by Dugu Qiuma, whether it was physically or spiritually. "Qiuma, this prodigy battlefield is very unfavorable for the Maluo dynasty. Princess Luoho's delicate body was close to Dugu Chiuma's side. Her tone was very soft. She would only show her true feminine side in front of Dugu Chiuma. The reason why Princess Luoho was worried was very simple. Because almost all the prodigies on the Maluo dynasty's blood ranking were dead. Dugu Chiuma alone had killed Yuan Hua, Master Hun Mo, Miao Yu, Shan Yu, and the others. Others such as the Sky Witch Sect's disciple and blood demon boy had also died in the Azura Bloody Road. This meant that the prodigy battlefield this time was the one with the least number of prodigies in the history of the Maluo dynasty. It's fine. They're just a bunch of weaklings. They'll just be sacrificing their lives. Dugu Chiuma's lips curled into a cold smile. I, Dugu Chiuma, am more than enough to defeat thousands of soldiers and horses. He said this not because he was arrogant, but because he really had the strength to do so. Battle God Demon Body, Soul Devouring Demon Eye, Connate Purple Chi, Heaven Demon Fate, and Demon Emperor descending to the 9th heaven. With the addition of the 5 unique talents, Dugu Chiuma's combat strength was unparalleled. In addition, he had the strength of the 3rd heavenly layer of the Divine Dwelling Realm, the Soul Extinguishing Flame and the Demon Sword Emperor's Heaven Taboo Supreme Arts, the Azura Saint King's Inheritance, the Heart of the Saint King, the Yellow Springs Blood River Domain, and the Ancient Demon Sword, God Devourer. With such a luxurious gift pack, it would be strange if Dugu still couldn't sweep through everything. Princess Luoho's beautiful eyes were filled with infatuation when she heard this. Dugu Chiuma's cold and domineering aura made her deeply infatuated. Yes, I believe you. Princess Luohua relaxed. As long as Dugu Chiuma was here, even if there were only the 2 of them in the Moro dynasty, they would be able to dominate a region. Dugu murmured in his heart as he gazed into the distance. If I become a demon, then the demon will bring disaster to the world. If I become a king, then the world will respect the emperor. Meanwhile, outside the Sword Emperor city of the Sword Dynasty, the vast and mighty army was also ready to set off. As the first dynasty of the 100 Great Dynasties, the Sword Dynasty always received the most attention every time the prodigy battlefield opened. The leading figures of the Sword Dynasty's prodigies, the 13 swordsmen, naturally received more attention. As for the leader of the 13 swordsmen, Jin Kuei, naturally received more attention. During this trip to the prodigy battlefield, many people in the outside world criticized Jin Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. After all, it was no secret that Yi Guqin's spiritual abode had been destroyed by Huang Qianqiu. Almost everyone knew about it. Many people were waiting to see the Sword Dynasty's performance, and many wanted to add insult to injury. At that moment, the 13 swordsmen stood side by side on the city walls of the Sword Emperor city. Everyone wore the same Sword Master mask on their faces. Only Yi Guqin, who was in the middle, wore a grimace mask that looked like it was laughing and crying at the same time. Not only did it not look out of place, but it also made him look special and mysterious. In front of them stood Confuzi and Wu Hongyan. Both of their cultivations had broken through to the sacred transcendence realm. In other words, apart from Yi Tianqing, who had left, the Sword Dynasty now had 3 heavenly tribulation saints and a half-step Saint King, the Proud Continent. However, the Proud Continent and Leng Qianhen had to stay in the Sword Dynasty. Therefore, the leaders this time were Confuzi and Wu Hongyan. Everyone, I'm sure you know that because of the last battle, the Sword Dynasty has made too many enemies. The War God Dynasty, Maluo Dynasty, and Domineering Sword Dynasty will probably do you harm. Wu Hongyan's expression was serious, and her tone was serious. The Sword Dynasty was indeed in a very dangerous situation during this trip to the prodigy battlefield. The 13 swordsmen in front of them would be targeted and suppressed like never before. We don't know who will be the one to settle the score. I swore that on the prodigy battlefield, I will kill the prodigies of the 3 dynasties. Jian Jinghong, who was wearing a mask, said in a murderous tone. During this time, his heavenly sword will had completely transformed into the heavenly sword Dao. It was a true creation realm sword Dao, and its power was undeniable. That's right. The Sword Dynasty has suffered enough. Now, it's time to make those dynasties pay the price. Ling Emoshu, who only had one left arm, also said coldly. The 13 swordsmen should be the ones to settle the score, not the prodigies of the other dynasties. The Sword Dynasty is the number 1 dynasty of the 100 great dynasties. I hope you will not tarnish our reputation. Kenfuzi cupped his hands solemnly to Yiguchen and the other 13 swordsmen. We will not disappoint the dynasty. Yiguchen and the other 13 swordsmen said firmly. For a moment, the world changed color because of this aura. Yiguchen sighed because he still had to end everything in the battlefield of the prodigies. All the past grievances and grudges would be used in this battle. Life and death grudges, enemies must shed blood. Let's fight a peerless battle. Yiguchen stood with his hands behind his back, his black hair fluttering in the wind. In this battlefield of the prodigies, he would suppress all his enemies. Next, the Sword Dynasty's group boarded the floating warship and set off. On the eve of the opening of the sacred imperial world, various forces would enter the sacred city of fortune. The sacred city of fortune was a city at the edge of the sacred imperial world. It was famous because of the sacred imperial world. On the way to the sacred city of fortune, Kenfuzi and Wu Hongyan also explained the various rules of the battlefield of the prodigies to Yiguchen and the others. The entire battlefield of the prodigies was divided into 2 parts. The front part was the sacred imperial world, and the back part was Sky Burial Island. Yiguchen already knew a lot about the sacred imperial world. It was the immortal Saint Emperor's small world, which contained many opportunities. As for Sky Burial Island, Yiguchen knew nothing about it. After the sacred imperial world is Sky Burial Island, so it's not too late to talk about it later. But what I can tell you now is that Sky Burial Island is far crueler than the sacred imperial world, because there will be super prodigies from the dark world, Wu Hongyan said solemnly. Dark world? Yiguchen narrowed his eyes. He already knew a little about the dark world. Demon Sword Emperor Jitian, Blood Tower Master Xue Yiqing, Xue Er, and Yi Zongshan, who had appeared on the Azura Bloody Road, were all related to the dark world. What kind of existence was the dark world? Why would it fight with the South Horizon region? Would he see Xue Er again on Sky Burial Island? Chapter 12:11. These matters were related to some of the secrets of the South Horizon region. Yiguchen could not figure it out at the moment. You don't have to think too much about the Burial Island. Focus on the battle for the Holy Imperial World. The most important thing is to seize the opportunity and become a venerable in the Heavenly Palace, Kenfuzi warned. The Burial Island was far crueler than the Holy Imperial World. The battles between the geniuses were more intense, not to mention that there would be powerful geniuses from the Dark World. To some extent, the Holy Imperial World was to give the geniuses of the Nantian region a chance to improve their strength. Of course, the competition was still fierce. Then, he told Yiguchen and the others some things about the Holy Imperial World. For example, the Holy Imperial World was very large. It was divided into the outer ring and the inner ring. The real opportunities were in the inner ring. Of course, the battles there were more intense. Most importantly, there were no rules against fighting to the death in the Holy Imperial World. That was to say, even if a genius died in the Holy Imperial World, the force behind him could only watch him die. They could not interfere in any way. Moreover, they could not interfere. The Holy Imperial World was a small world inside the immortal Saint Emperor. It was suppressed by the rules. Powerful beings could not enter the Holy Imperial World. Moreover, the immortal Saint Emperor might want to pass down the opportunity to the younger generation. Therefore, some of the older cultivators could not enter the Holy Imperial World. That was to say, in the Holy Imperial World, they had to rely on their own strength. Those who relied on their background were not destined to live long. This is the kind of battlefield I want. Yiguchen was not afraid at all. Instead, a smile appeared on his face. He had relied on his own strength all the way. A person like him would have a good life in the Holy Imperial World. But you have to be careful. The geniuses of the War God Dynasty, the Mola Dynasty, and the Tyrant Blade Dynasty are not easy to deal with, Kenfuzi warned. He was afraid that the 13 swordsmen would underestimate the enemy. Yes, I heard that the white-haired sword demon appeared in the Mola dynasty. He is very powerful. He killed many people in the Azura Bloody Road. He can even compete with Gu Xiaoyang, one of the top 10 young masters, Wu Hongyan said in a serious tone. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's heart trembled. I've also heard about it. Even if the white-haired sword demon's strength hasn't reached the level of the 10 great childs, I'm afraid he's not far from it. Jian Jinghong's expression was equally solemn. Moreover, the white-haired sword demon seems to have become the prince consort of the Molo dynasty, marrying Princess Luoho. At that time, for Jinkui, some of the people present looked at Yi Guchen. They all knew that Yi Guchen and Princess Luoho had some conflicts when they were in the Holy Dynasty's treasury. When Yi Guchen saw this, he could not help but laugh in his heart. He didn't expect that one of his clones would make such a name for himself, to the point that even the prodigies of the Sword Dynasty were wary of him. Don't worry. Leave that Duguchuma to me. Yi Guchen waved his hand and said in a relaxed tone. It's better not to underestimate the enemy. Jian Jinghong, Xuanlian, Jiang Fengyan, Su Zihao, and the others all advised with a solemn expression. Underestimating the enemy is a big mistake. Wu Hongyan also put on a stern face and solemnly warned Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. He was a little speechless. Not only would Duguchuma not obstruct him and the Sword Dynasty. Instead, he would become an important helper for Yi Guchen to suppress all his enemies. Next, Yi Guchen and the others discussed the details of the Holy Imperial World as they headed to the Holy City of Fortune. The Holy Imperial World was located in the eastern region of the Nantian region. The Holy City of Fortune was thousands of miles away from the Holy Imperial World. It was located in a dangerous mountain range with a myriad of scenery. After half a month, the Sword Dynasty's team finally arrived at the Holy City of Fortune. Yi Guchen stood on the deck and looked into the distance. He saw a magnificent city standing in the middle of the mountain range. The surrounding mountains seemed to be the city's walls. It was so vast that it was bigger than 10 sword imperial cities combined. However, it was understandable. Many forces in the South Horizon region gathered here. The number of people was extremely terrifying. Even though the entire Holy City of Fortune was extremely huge, looking down from the sky, the flow of people was still extremely dense. Let's go to the place where we'll settle down first, Confuzi said. The Sword Dynasty's team landed in an area of the Holy City of Fortune. It was an area exclusive to the Sword Dynasty. Looking at the team descending from the sky, countless people in the Holy City of Fortune cast their gazes over. That's the Sword Dynasty's team. Tisk Tsk, I heard that the Sword Dynasty's Jinkui's spiritual palace was destroyed by Huang Qianqiu. I thought he wouldn't come, but he still came. Looking at the 13 swordsmen standing at the bow of the ship, especially Yi Guchen in the lead, many people in the city whispered to each other, revealing all kinds of playful tones. Yi Guchen also felt that there were some cold eyes staring at him in the dark, with a strong sense of hostility. Oh, this is good. My enemies are all gathered together. I'll get rid of them all at once. Yi Guchen sneered in his heart. After that, Yi Guchen and the others also entered the Sword Dynasty's area. There were all kinds of pavilions, and they could choose a place to stay. There was still half a month before the opening of the Holy Imperial World. There was still time for the various geniuses to adjust their conditions. Brother Dugu, do you want to go to the Martial Monument and Divine Lotus to take a look? Just as Yi Guchen was about to adjust his breath and meditate, Jian Jinghong and the others came over and asked, Martial Monument, Divine Lotus? Yi Guchen was puzzled. Previously, Confuzi and the others had only told them some things about the Holy Imperial World. They did not mention much about the Holy City of Fortune. Jian Jinghong smiled and said, The Martial Monument and Divine Lotus are two testing places that have existed for a long time in the Holy City of Fortune. The Martial Monument tests one's combat strength, and the Divine Lotus tests one's aptitude. There is such a mystical place? Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows slightly. The Martial Monument was set up by later experts. However, the Divine Lotus is said to have always been with the Holy Imperial World. It tests one's aptitude very accurately, Jian Jinghong said. Generally speaking, people who had just arrived at the holy city of fortune would use the martial monument to test their combat strength, and the divine lotus to test their aptitude. Through this, they could determine their level among the geniuses. Let's go and take a look. Yi Guchen stood up. The 13 swordsmen went all the way to the martial monument and divine lotus. As Yi Guchen walked, countless gazes were cast on him from both sides of the road. As the number 1 sword dynasty of the 100 great dynasties, the 13 swordsmen were not inferior to the geniuses of the overlord forces. Are they going to the martial monument and divine lotus to be tested? Forget about the other swordsmen, that Jin Kuei's spiritual dwelling has been broken. Isn't he asking to be humiliated if he goes to test his combat strength and aptitude? Many onlookers were surprised. This group of people is really ignorant. Mu Xingzhu and the others were indignant when they heard the gossip. Yi Guchen was calm and composed. Before the battlefield of geniuses began, he would preserve as much of his strength as he could. When the time came for him to enter the holy imperial universe, his performance would definitely shock everyone. Chapter 12:12. Before long, Yi Guchen and the rest of the 13 sword princes arrived at the location of the martial tablet and the sacred lotus. The sacred lotus was located in the central square of the sacred city of fortune. Its history was as long as the sacred imperial world. There were rumors that the sacred lotus might be related to the sacred imperial world and the immortality sacred emperor. However, after a long period of research, other than knowing that the sacred lotus had the ability to test one's aptitude, there were no other uses for it. As for the martial tablet, it was built by later generations and stood not far from the sacred lotus. When Yi Guchen arrived, there was already a sea of people around him. Those who came to the sacred city of fortune for the first time were all here to test their aptitude. Yi Guchen looked over and saw a huge golden lotus standing on the square. It was a dazzling golden color and it was very eye-catching. Yi Guchen counted carefully. The entire sacred lotus had 50 petals. Jian Jinghong explained, "This sacred lotus has 50 petals. When testing one's aptitude, the more petals there are, the stronger the aptitude." "I see." Yi Guchen nodded slightly. Jian Jinghong continued, "Brother Dugu, do you know how many leaves the holy lotus has ever sprouted?" "How many?" Yi Guchen raised an eyebrow. 49 leaves, Jian Jinghong said with a hint of emotion in his voice. Even though he was born with the creation sword intent and had outstanding strength, it was obvious that he couldn't reach the level of 49 leaves. Oh, only 1 leaf away from perfection? Who set the record? Yi Guchen was slightly surprised and asked. "Heavenly God Sword Sect, Di Haoyan," Jian Jinghong said. Boom. A surge of aura erupted from Yi Guchen's body. "Brother Dugu, what's wrong?" Jian Jinghong asked. In the Sword Dynasty, only Proud Divine Continent, Leng Qianhen, Mu Xingzhu, and a few others knew about Yi Guchen's true identity. Jian Jinghong didn't know about Yi Guchen's true identity, so he didn't understand why Yi Guchen would have such a reaction. Phew! Yi Guchen exhaled deeply and restrained his aura. Upon hearing this name, Yi Guchen had an instinctive reaction. Isn't that Di Haoyan known to be a rank 10 utmost exalted, born with a perfect body? Even he is unable to fully open the Saint Lotus? After calming down, Yi Guchen asked. Logically speaking, Di Haoyan's aptitude should be perfect. After all, in the entire South Horizon region, there weren't many 10th grade supremes. Jian Jinghong explained, "You don't know about this. In the Dian, there are 49 leaves. Many people think that the limit of the Holy Lotus is 49 leaves. Therefore, Di Haoyan should be the one who's closest to perfection. Has no one ever sprouted 50 leaves on the Holy Lotus before?" Yi Guchen's eyes shone with a profound light. "Never." Jian Jinghong shook his head. Yi Guchen nodded and looked at Wu Bei again. There were a total of 100 floors on the martial boulder. Martial artists who wanted to test their combat strength could directly perform their moves on the martial boulder. The higher the combat strength, the higher the number of floors that were lit. The highest was 100 floors. Compared to the Saint Lotus, There were obviously more people on Wu Bei's side. Aptitude only represented talent, but combat strength was the actual strength. In the sacred imperial world, aptitude wasn't important. The strength that one could display was the most important. But isn't that the 13 swordsmen of the Sword Dynasty? They really came. Many people in the square also noticed the arrival of Yi Guqin and the others. As the first dynasty's supremes, Yi Guqin and the others were the center of attention. I'll go and test first. Among the 13 swordsmen, a slightly shorter figure wearing a monk's robe jumped out. It was Kong Kong. That's the last of the 13 swordsmen. But I heard that he's only 12 years old. Is the Sword Dynasty so weak now that a 12-year-old can become a swordsman? Many people laughed, and many of them had sarcastic looks on their faces. Clearly, many people wanted to see the Sword Dynasty suffer. Kong Kong didn't say anything and directly hit Wu Bei with his palm. With a boom, Wu Bei lit up with a dazzling light and rushed to the 70th floor. So strong? Everyone was stunned. He was only a 12-year-old kid. Those geniuses from the other empires who looked down on the Sword Empire and even mocked them shut their mouths and looked embarrassed. Most of the Supremes here were below the 60th floor, which was a failure. In other words, many people were worse than Kong Kong, a 12-year-old kid. It's only the 70th floor. I shouldn't have been so playful. Kong Kong pouted and shook his head. This made the group stagger and almost fall to the ground. How could he be so discouraging? But the more discouraging thing was yet to come. Kong Kong went to the St. Lotus area and placed his hand on the St. Lotus to test his aptitude. The St. Lotus bloomed one leaf after another. In the end, under everyone's stunned gaze, the St. Lotus bloomed with 45 leaves. Everyone was tongue-tied, and their eyes almost fell to the ground. Even if one was a Yonko character, his aptitude would at most hover around 40. Yet Kong Kong had 45 leaves. Even Jian Jinghong and the others were stunned, let alone the others. On the other hand, Xuanlian's expression was calm as if he was not surprised. As expected, it's because of Kong Kong's special physique. Also, Xuanlian once said that Kong Kong was the best candidate to become the 9th Sword Buddha. Yi Guqin's eyes were deep. Kong Kong, who came from the West Brilliance domain, clearly had his own secrets. Next, the other swordsmen also began their tests. Han Lingxian, Ling Moyin, Suki Miyazaki, Yu Shan, Xiao Jun, and the others' combat strength and aptitude were not bad. After all, they were carefully selected. However, they were not as stunning as Kong Kong. Then, it was Ling Yimou, Su Zihao, Jiang Fengyan, and the others. Their combat strength was slightly stronger, and their aptitudes were not bad. Finally, it was Mu Xingzhu, Xuanlian, and Jian Jinghong. Mu Xingzhu had the innate ability, the undying soul pearl, given to her by Ying Ning. With Yi Guqin's guidance, her strength was ranked among the top 5 among the 13 swordsmen. Xuanlian, on the other hand, had always been one of the top figures in the Sword Dynasty. Jian Jinghong, on the other hand, had always been the most famous prodigy in the Sword Dynasty. He was born with the heavenly Dao sword intent between his brows. Now that it had transformed into the heavenly sword Dao, his strength was even more powerful. Jian Jinghong was tested on the martial steel. His combat strength was at the 89th layer. He was only one layer away from the 90th layer. During the test of the St. Lotus, Jian Jinghong had also sprouted 38 leaves. Although he did not reach 40 leaves, it was still a stunning achievement. It could be said that other than Yi Guqin, there was no one else. Jian Jinghong and Xuanlian were the leaders of the team. That's the first dynasty for you. You can't be underestimated. Even in the Holy Imperial Universe, you can probably sweep away a region. The performance of Jian Jinghong and the others made the geniuses of the other dynasties less contemptuous of the Sword Dynasty and more vigilant. But then, the atmosphere became a little strange. This was because everyone's eyes were focused on Yi Guqin. If Jian Kuei and the others had such a performance, then what could Yi Guqin, who was from the Sword Dynasty, do? Especially when the divine dwellings were crippled, many people had a playful look in their eyes. Would this Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty seek his own humiliation and step forward to be tested? Chapter 12:13. Yi Guqin remained calm as he felt the gazes on him. As the Jin Kuei of the Sword Dynasty, he was prepared to be the center of attention. But Yi Guqin did not forget the warning of the proud divine continent before he left. He would hide as much as he could and give his enemies a big surprise after he entered the sacred emperor world. Otherwise, Yi Guqin's natural advantage would be lost if the enemy was alerted in advance. Yi Guqin was not a person who liked fame. With his true strength and talent, he would definitely perform amazingly in the martial tablet and sacred lotus. But Yi Guqin did not want to show off and gain fame. The test is over. Let's go back. Yi Guqin said calmly with his hands behind his back. Jian Jinghong and the others were stunned, but they nodded in tacit agreement. They respected Yi Guqin's choice. What? He didn't choose to take the test. That's normal. If it were me, I wouldn't want to take the test either with my divine dwellings destroyed and my cultivation lost. It's just asking to be humiliated. The crowd was in an uproar. Most of them were from dynasties that were hostile to the Sword Dynasty. These people only know how to add insult to injury. They haven't seen Master's true strength. Mu Xingzu snorted. She worshipped and trusted Yi Guqin. She believed that Yi Guqin would not be crippled. Why care about the gossip? Yi Guqin said indifferently, just as he turned around and was about to leave. A cold voice filled with extreme hatred suddenly came from the other side of the crowd. The famous Jin Kuei of the Sword Dynasty is willing to be a coward? These words were a direct humiliation. After all, Yi Guqin was Jin Kuei. Even if others criticized him, they would only discuss it in private. No one was stupid enough to provoke the 13th swordsman. And the person who spoke was directly targeting him. That is, however, when the crowd saw the person who had spoken, they all revealed astonished expressions. A group of people separated from the crowd and came over. Of the two young men in the lead, one of them was wearing a platinum dragon-patterned armor. He had the heroic bearing of a dragon and a phoenix, and his aura was extraordinary. The other young man was clad in tiger-patterned black-gold battle armor. He had a dignified appearance and a ferocious expression. They were Zhao Shinkong and Zhao Weihuang from the War God Empire. The person who spoke was Zhao Weihuang. There were more than 10 people behind them. They were all prodigies ranked in the top 10 of the War God Dynasty's War God list. Zhong Shan, Zhao Xiaodi and the others were also there. He's a genius on the War God Dynasty's War God list. Is that the little War God of the War God Dynasty, Zhao Shinkong? His aura is indeed oppressive. There's also that Zhao Weihuang. He's not much weaker than Zhao Shinkong. I heard that his father, the Earth War Emperor, died at the hands of the Sword Alliance's leader, Proud Divine Prefecture. This is getting interesting. Everyone raised their spirits as they watched the scene before them with great interest. The War God Dynasty and the Sword Dynasty had been entangled with each other for a long time. After all, the War God Dynasty had always wanted to seize the throne of the First Dynasty. Not to mention that even the Earth War Emperor had fallen in the last great battle. The enmity between them was not small. What do you mean? Jian Jinghong stepped forward. Sword intent enveloped his body, causing the world to change color. As expected of sword intent at the creation level. I will definitely have a good fight with you in the Sacred Emperor world. Zhao Shinkong stepped forward, the aura of the 6th layer of the divine dwelling erupting from him like a storm. Heavens, Zhao Shinkong has reached the 6th layer of the divine dwelling. He's already comparable to the heaven prides of the overlord forces. Everyone gasped in astonishment. The little war god of the War God Dynasty was indeed worthy of his reputation. Zhao Weihuang, who was standing at the side, stared at Yi Guqin with cold, murderous eyes. As the Jin Kuei of the Sword Dynasty, do you not even have the courage to take the test? Or have you completely become a cripple? Zhao Wuang's words made the sword princes of the Sword Dynasty seethe with killing intent. On the contrary, Yi Guqin himself was the calmest. Rather than arguing here, why don't we settle this in the Sacred Emperor world? Yi Guqin said indifferently. A cripple like you is not worthy. In the Sacred Emperor world, it's not you and I who are fighting. It's me, Zhao Weihuang, who will torture you to death. Zhao Weihuang said coldly. You're courting death. Ling Emoshu could not help but want to attack. After all, it was Yi Guqin who had given him a new life. Ling Emoshu could not tolerate anyone insulting Yi Guqin. Forget it. Yi Guqin raised his hand to stop Ling Emoshu. At this moment, another group of people walked out from another part of the crowd. The leader of the group, a well-dressed young master, laughed. Friends from the War God dynasty are right. Some people rely on their status, but they don't know that they're already a cripple that everyone despises. This group of people was none other than the princes and princesses of the great Qian dynasty. The well-dressed young master who spoke was the first prince of the great Qian dynasty. That's right. Jin Kuei of the Sword dynasty only dares to use his status to deal with the great Qian dynasty. In the end, he doesn't even dare to breathe loudly in front of the War God dynasty, the second princess of the great Qian dynasty said. Her delicate face was full of sarcasm. Jin Kuei, Thubai, I didn't think that you would have a day like this. Another prince stood out. Yi Guqin knew this person. Back in the ancient chaos wilderness, he was called over by Yang Haoye to get the millennial mica from Yi Guqin. In the end, he was still shocked. It was the third prince of the great Qian dynasty, Yang Haoyu. However, at this moment, the third prince looked calm. In his eyes, Yi Guqin, whose spiritual dwelling was destroyed, was no longer a threat. It seems that you haven't learned the lesson from Yang Haoye. Yi Guqin took a deep look at Yang Haoyu. That's because he's stupid. But now, what right do you have to say such things? Yang Haoyu snorted coldly. The great Qian dynasty was not the only one who wanted to deal with the Sword dynasty. The War God dynasty, the Maluo dynasty, the Tyrant Saber dynasty, and so on all wanted to deal with the Sword dynasty. It's really lively here. At this moment, another voice sounded. In the distance, starlight flowed and a group of young men and women in blue and silver robes appeared. It's actually the people of the Sky Star dynasty. There was an uproar in all directions. They didn't expect another powerful dynasty to appear. The Sky Star dynasty. Yi Guqin's eyes suddenly became sharp. When they were still in the Saint Origin dynasty battlefield selection, Yi Guqin had once fought with the crown prince of the Sky Star dynasty, Xinghong. Later on in the Infinite Plains, the crown prince of the Sky Star dynasty, Xingimo, tried to kill Yi Guqin. It could be said that Yi Guqin's hostility towards the Sky Star dynasty was no less than the Sky God Sword sect and other forces. In the group of people from the Sky Star dynasty, the leader was an extraordinarily handsome young man. Is this the first dynasty's Jin Kuei? Don't tell me that you don't even have the courage to take the test? The young man's lips curled into a mocking smile. The Sky Star dynasty and the Sword dynasty didn't have much of a grudge. It was just that everyone wanted to step on Jin Kuei of the Sword dynasty to get to the top. This young man was also one of them. It's Crown Prince Xingyang of the Sky Star dynasty. TSK, even the Sky Star dynasty wants to deal with the Sword dynasty? Yi Guqin's eyes were deep. It seemed that after the death of Crown Prince Xinghong, another Crown Prince was appointed in the Star dynasty. It was this Crown Prince Xinghong. The Sky Star dynasty was backed by the Starry Sword Pavilion and ranked 6th among the 100 great dynasties. Crown Prince Xingyang's means were obviously not that simple. The Sky Star dynasty. Yi Guqin's eyes were filled with killing intent. He wouldn't have any mercy or tolerance towards the people of the Sky Star dynasty. In the Holy Imperial world, he would kill anyone he saw. Chapter 12-14. Right now, the War God dynasty, the Star dynasty, and the Great Qian dynasty were all targeting Yi Guqin. Everyone in the square couldn't help but sigh. The bird that pokes its head out gets shot. As the top dynasty, the Sword dynasty naturally attracted a lot of hatred. Many dynasties wanted to pull the Sword dynasty down from its position as the top dynasty. Jin Kuei, whose divine dwelling had been destroyed, was undoubtedly the easiest to attack. Seeing that Yi Guqin was unmoved, Zhao Weihuang and the others sneered. Forget it. Since this Jin Kuei is a coward, let us test him. Right now, Yi Guqin was surrounded by the Sword princes. Zhao Weihuang couldn't attack Yi Guqin in front of them. Jian Jinghong and the others would definitely stop him. Moreover, he had already achieved his goal of humiliating him. Zhao Weihuang hid his killing intent in his heart. Immediately after, they began the test. Zhao Weihuang took out his 10th tribulation weapon, the tiger head clear gold spear. He gathered the true qi in his body and reached the 5th level of the divine dwelling realm. He was only a little bit weaker than Zhao Shinkong and the other Overlord faction's prodigies. Zhao Weihuang's spear struck the martial tablet, and the energy waves were extremely powerful. The martial tablet immediately burst out with a dazzling light and reached the 82nd step. This result was already very good. In fact, the prodigies who reached the passing mark of the 60th step had already surpassed the majority of people. The prodigies who could reach the 70th step were even rarer. Only about 1/10 of the prodigies could do so. Those who could reach the 80th step and above were as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. There was probably not even 1% of them. And those who could reach the 90th step and above were basically the 1 emperor, 4 sovereigns, 10 princes, dragon phoenix list prodigies, and so on. Seeing his result, Zhao Weihuang said indifferently, "It's still a little lacking. It's barely passable." These words made everyone curse in their hearts. How pretentious! If this result is barely passable, then how are the other prodigies going to live? Next, Zhao Weihuang tested the Saint Lotus and made it sprout 32 leaves. This was already very good. Such a result made everyone click their tongues in admiration. Zhao Weihuang was worthy of his 2nd place on the war god list. Following that, Zhao Shinkong's performance was even more stunning. The martial steel had reached the 90th level, and the sacred lotus had sprouted 38 leaves, just like Jian Jinghong. This kind of result was definitely at the level of a sky pride from an overlord-level force. What surprised everyone was Zhao Xiaodi. Her results in the martial steel examination weren't too high, only reaching the 74th level. However, the Holy Lotus's aptitude test revealed that he had 39 leaves. Moreover, she was only 13 years old, about the same age as Kong Kong. Yi Guchen was not surprised by this. He had spent some time with Zhao Xiaodi in the Sacred Dynasty's treasure trove. Zhao Xiaodi was born with monstrous strength. Even Yi Guchen could only use ancient god power to suppress Zhao Xiaodi. Her bloodline talent was probably quite extraordinary. All in all, the War God Dynasty's prodigies test caused Jian Jinghong and the others to have serious expressions. A prodigy on the God of War list was definitely a formidable opponent for the 13th swordsman. Next, the people of the Heavenly Star Dynasty and the Great Qian Dynasty also began the test. That Crown Prince Xingyang did not test him. He had a secretive look on his face. As for the others, there were also some who had outstanding performances. Under such a comparison, Yi Guchen's behavior of not testing caused more discussion. At that moment, a figure in green robes came over on a sword from afar. "Oh, this is Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty, who was crippled by senior brother Huang Qianqiu?" His calm voice rang out, but it caused the originally noisy square to instantly quiet down. Yi Guchen looked over. The figure who came over on a sword was a young man in green robes. He had red lips and white teeth, and he had the appearance of a phoenix. In particular, the sword under his feet emitted a green sword light that seemed to be able to cut through the void. That's Chen Qingxiao from the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, a prodigy on the Dragon Phoenix list. Someone cried out involuntarily. Instantly, the square was in an uproar. Finally, a prodigy from an overlord-level force appeared. "Chen Qingxiao," Yi Guchen muttered. He had learned about the Dragon Phoenix list before coming to the Sacred City of Fortune. Chen Qingxiao was a prodigy from the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, ranked 14th on the Dragon Phoenix list. But 14th was not a low rank. One had to know that the Dragon Phoenix list was not like the Sword list, Saber list, Blood list, or God of War list. Those lists were all dynasty lists that only recorded the rankings of the prodigies within a dynasty. The Dragon Phoenix list recorded the prodigies of the entire Nantian region. The prodigies of the various overlord-level forces would also be listed. And Chen Qingxiao being able to be ranked 14th already represented his extraordinary aptitude and strength. Seeing the arrival of the Dragon Phoenix list prodigy, The surrounding crowd revealed a look of respect. With his extraordinary strength and background, Qin Qingxiao was destined to be a cut above the rest and steal everyone's attention. However, the faces of the people from the Sword Dynasty were very cold. Because what Qin Qingxiao said just now was very disrespectful to Ye Guqin. Ye Guqin glanced at Qin Qingxiao indifferently. His strength was indeed not bad, but he was not qualified to show off in front of Ye Guqin. "Young Master Qin, why are you talking to a cripple?" Zhao Weihuang sneered. Qin Qingxiao shook his head slightly and said, "I'm just curious. What's so special about the person that made senior brother Huang Qianqiu take action? But now, it seems that he's just SOSO. The faces of the people from the Sword Dynasty were cold. Qin Qingxiao continued, "Birds of a feather flock together. To be able to follow your lead, it can be seen that the other sword princes of the Sword Dynasty are just SOSO. Qin Qingxiao was very disappointed. He actually wanted to recruit the 13th sword prince of the Sword Dynasty. Of course, he also wanted to fulfill Huang Qianqiu's orders and take in Jian Kuei as a servant. However, Ye Guqin's strength disappointed Qin Qingxiao. There was no use in having such a crippled servant. Ye Guqin's eyes darkened slightly. Ye Guqin did not care about the criticism, but if it implicated the other sword princes, Ye Guqin would not allow it. He said indifferently, "Even if my spiritual palace is crippled, it's not something you can talk about." Qin Qingxiao raised his eyebrows slightly. Ye Guqin did not say a word and walked towards the martial tablet. This sudden turn of events caused everyone to reveal astonished expressions. Is Jian Kuei going to the martial tablet to take the test? Is his spiritual palace not crippled? Many people were surprised. Zhao Weihuang and the others also stared at Ye Guqin with different expressions. Ye Guqin walked to the martial tablet and let out a deep breath. He did not want to show his strength, but the flies were too noisy. Ye Guqin did not use the power of his spiritual palace. Instead, he used the power of his physical body. The ancient god power in his body surged, and a huge force rampaged through his meridians. He punched at the martial tablet, and an ear-piercing sound burst out. Terrifying waves of air swept in all directions. Some of the weaker cultivators, such as the princes and princesses of the Great Qian dynasty, were directly pushed back by the waves of air. A dazzling brilliance spread out from the martial tablet, blinding everyone's eyes. Chapter 12:15. A dazzling brilliance bloomed on the martial tablet. It was as bright as the other geniuses who had taken the test. After the brilliance, everyone looked over at the same time. 85 levels of the martial tablet had been lit up. Many gasps could be heard in all directions. Many people felt their scalps tingle as they looked at Ye Guqin as if they were looking at a monster. He was definitely a monster to be able to reach 85 levels of combat strength without the support of true qi. How can this be? The faces of the princes and princesses of the Great Qian dynasty stiffened. Their eyes trembled as if they had seen a ghost. Wasn't Ye Guqin's spiritual dwellings broken? How could he still have such terrifying combat strength? Even the princes and princesses of the Great Qian dynasty had only lit up 70-odd floors at most. In fact, they were even smug about their results. However, Ye Guqin's performance made them completely doubt their lives. Crown Prince Xingyang and the others of the Heavenly Star dynasty were also stunned. As for Zhao Weihuang and the other geniuses of the War God dynasty, they thought they had seen wrongly. Could there be something wrong with the martial tablet? Zhong Shan shook his head, unwilling to believe it. The martial tablet has never been wrong. The combat strength it measures is generally correct. Zhao Shinkong's face was also solemn. Your spiritual dwellings have recovered? Zhao Weihuang could not believe it. He stared at Ye Guqin like a snake that was about to devour its prey. Ye Guqin did not reply. The entire square was deathly silent. The geniuses of the various dynasties who had ill intentions towards the Sword dynasty and even slandered Ye Guqin felt their cheeks burning as if they had been slapped hard. The combat strength they had tested was not even as good as Ye Guqin, whose spiritual dwellings had been destroyed. Qin Qingxiao was surprised as well, but he soon calmed down. He looked at Ye Guqin with a strange expression and said, I didn't expect that your physical body would still be so powerful even though your divine dwellings were destroyed by senior brother Huang Qianqiu. However, you are too naive to think that you can dominate the holy imperial world with your physical strength alone. Although physical strength was of great help in actual combat, it was not the most important thing. The most important thing was the level of true qi cultivation. Therefore, Qin Qingxiao's words were not wrong. You don't have to worry about that, Yi Guqin said indifferently. Because of Huang Qianqiu, he did not have a good impression of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion. Not to mention, Qin Qingxiao definitely didn't come with good intentions. Zhao Weihuang and the others heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Yi Guqin's divine palace hadn't recovered, he wouldn't be a real threat to them. Then, everyone looked at Yi Guqin with curiosity. Would he go to the Holy Lotus to test his aptitude? After all, Yi Guqin was famous in the Sword Dynasty because he had passed the 20th level of Mount Saint Crossing and received the title of Natural Saint. That title carried a lot of weight. It was also because of this that Dugubai's name spread throughout the surrounding dynasties. However, to everyone's disappointment, Yi Guqin didn't seem to have any intention of going to the Holy Lotus to test his aptitude. Oh, I heard that you received the title of Natural Saint and are destined to become a saint. Why don't you go to the Holy Lotus to test your aptitude? Qin Qingxiao asked. What does it have to do with you? Yi Guqin said coldly. Young Master Qin, aren't you forcing someone whose divine dwellings have been destroyed to test his aptitude? The Crown Prince of Great Qian Dynasty said with a smile. That's true. Qin Qingxiao nodded. However, it seemed like he was doing it on purpose. Jian Jinghong, Mu Xingzhu, and the others looked solemn. From the moment Qin Qingxiao appeared, he had been looking down on Yi Guqin and the others with a superior attitude. It was as if they were born to be inferior. Yi Guqin didn't say anything. The reason why he didn't participate in the Holy Lotus test wasn't because he was afraid that he wouldn't get a good result. On the contrary, Yi Guqin was afraid that if he got a good result, it would cause a sensation and attract the attention of thousands of people. It was definitely not a good thing to attract attention during the opening of the battlefield of prodigies. However, in the eyes of others, Yi Guqin's action made it seem like he didn't dare to go to the Holy Lotus because his divine dwellings had been destroyed. Let's go, Yi Guqin said. He didn't want to stay here for too long. However, Qin Qingxiao's eyes dimmed and he said, Wait, Jiankui, although your divine dwellings have been destroyed, I am still willing to give you a chance. A chance? Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows. Qin Qingxiao stood with his hands behind his back and said, It's simple. Follow me and become my follower. That way, no one in the sacred imperial realm will dare to attack you. As soon as Qin Qingxiao said that, there was a dead silence. Everyone was surprised and their eyes widened. In the past, when the battlefield of prodigies opened, there was no lack of weaker prodigies from dynasties becoming the followers of the overlord forces. This was a common situation. However, the prodigies were weak and came from small dynasties. They had no choice but to seek the protection of the overlord forces. However, Yi Guqin was Jiankui from the first dynasty, the Sword Dynasty. If Yi Guqin really became a follower, his reputation would be ruined and the entire Sword Dynasty would lose face. For example, prodigies from dynasties like Zhao Shinkong and Jian Jinghong were no weaker than the overlord forces. How could they become a follower? Qin Qingxiao's words were obviously belittling and humiliating Yi Guqin. You've gone too far. Jian Jinghong raised his eyebrows. If they were in the sacred imperial realm, he would definitely attack Qin Qingxiao. I only want Jiankui to become a follower. Of course, if the other sword sons are willing, I can accept them as well, Qin Qingxiao said indifferently. When he said that, even the calm Xuanlian couldn't help but frown, let alone Jian Jinghong. Yi Guqin looked deeply at Qin Qingxiao and said, Did Huang Qianqiu ask you to say that? Qin Qingxiao's eyes flashed. No, I'm just giving you a chance to resolve the conflict between you and senior brother Huang Qianqiu. In fact, it was Huang Qianqiu who had asked him to find Yi Guqin. Looks like Huang Qianqiu still can't forget about the ultimate sword domain that I possess, Yi Guqin thought to himself as he spoke with a cold smile. I'll give you a chance as well. Follow me and become my follower, and I'll spare your life in the sacred imperial realm." Yi Guchen's words caused an uproar. Yi Guchen was probably the first person who dared to go against a prodigy from an overlord force, especially one on the Dragon Phoenix ranking. Chen Qingxiao's face darkened. As a prodigy on the Dragon Phoenix ranking, this was the first time someone had dared to humiliate him like that. Chen Qingxiao laughed angrily. "You're just a cripple. Do you really think you're someone important? With your strength, you're not even worthy of being my servant. Well, let's wait and see. Maybe you will really become my servant in the future," Yi Guchen said with a deep look in his eyes. He knew that Dugu's soul-eating demonic eye had awakened an ability, the spiritual demonic seed. If he could enslave Chen Qingxiao, a prodigy on the Dragon Phoenix ranking, how exciting would that be? Chapter 12:16. Yi Guchen naturally had the strength and confidence to say that. He and Dugu had the ability to control demons. They might be able to suppress Chen Qingxiao and enslave him. Of course, no one else would believe that. I'm afraid there's something wrong with Jian Kuei's head, the princes and princesses of the great Qian dynasty mocked. Crown Prince Xingyang of the Tianqing dynasty also shook his head and said, "That's ridiculous." In his opinion, no dynasty's genius was qualified to say that to a genius on the Dragon Phoenix list. "Let's go." Yi Guchen waved his hand. It was really boring to argue with this group of people. Seeing Yi Guchen and the others turn and leave, Chen Qingxiao's eyes were clouded. Yi Guchen didn't take him, a genius on the Dragon Phoenix list, seriously at all. But Chen Qingxiao didn't make a move. After all, it wouldn't be good to fight in the sacred city of fortune. Not to mention that it might attract the strong cultivators of the Sword Dynasty. The Sword Dynasty was no longer the Sword Dynasty of the past. It had 3 saints and even a half-step Saint King. Even Chen Qingxiao couldn't go too far. It would be troublesome if the saints of the Sword Dynasty were attracted. "Jian Kuei, you'll pay for your words in the sacred imperial realm. Senior brother Huang Qianqiu doesn't have to do anything. I'll make you regret it." Chen Qingxiao said coldly. "I'll keep you company," Yi Guchen said without looking back. This made many people sigh with emotion. As expected of the First Dynasty's Jianke, his attitude was tough. But some people sneered. They thought that tough without strength was just a joke. The matter came to an end for now. However, news of the conflict between Yi Guchen and Chen Qingxiao had spread. Most people thought that Yi Guchen was overestimating himself. Although he was the Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty, he couldn't treat a genius from an overlord force so arrogantly. There were also a small number of people who supported Yi Guchen. Most of them were dynasty prodigies. Because in the eyes of the prodigies from the overlord forces, the prodigies from the various dynasties were indeed born inferior, and they were existences like servants and cannon fodder. Yi Guchen's actions were equivalent to clearing the name of those dynasty prodigies who had been discriminated against and oppressed. Deep into the night, the entire holy city of good fortune was silent. At night, most of the geniuses were at the resting areas of their respective forces, sitting cross-legged and meditating. No one could be seen in the square where the divine lotus was located. It would only become lively during the day. Right at this moment, a figure flashed and arrived in front of the sacred lotus. It was Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen muttered to himself, "I'm also very curious. What level has my current aptitude reached?" He didn't take the test during the day because he was afraid that his aptitude would attract the attention of many people. If that happened, it would attract the attention of many experts. He was afraid that even Yi Guchen's identity would be revealed in advance. Therefore, Yi Guchen decided to take the test when there was no one around. Di Haotian can make the sacred lotus sprout 49 leaves. I wonder how many leaves I can sprout? Yi Guchen thought to himself as he placed his hand on the sacred lotus. All of a sudden, Yi Guchen felt a wave of ripples sweeping across his body, probing every corner of his body. Yi Guchen's various aptitudes, trump cards, and techniques were all detected. However, when the ripples came into contact with the Thunder Tribulation Sword in the depths of Yi Guchen's dantian, it was as if they were avoiding a snake or a scorpion. It was as if they were extremely afraid and didn't have the qualifications to probe at all. However, Yiguchen was still very confident in his own aptitude. After all, the cultivation technique he cultivated was the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. He had to overcome 9 tribulations to become a god. From the most basic perfect physical body, to the ultimate sea of qi, then to the chaotic sea of knowledge, and finally to the current flawless spiritual palace. Yiguchen had reached the limit of his own body in every cultivation realm. This was an advantage that the other prodigies did not have. As expected, Yiguchen was not surprised. After a moment of silence, the sacred lotus slowly lit up. The petals opened at an extremely fast speed. 10 leaf, 11 leaf, 12 leaf, 34 leaves, 35 leaves, 36 leaves, 45 leaves, 46 leaves, 48 leaves. Finally, the sacred lotus had its 49th leaf. Is it over? Yiguchen frowned slightly as he looked at the final leaf that was trembling slightly but had yet to blossom. At this moment, Yiguchen felt the 360 golden sword veins in his body that had been dormant for a long time begin to heat up. His blood began to boil. It was as though a mysterious bloodline power was being awakened by the power of the sacred lotus. This is... Yiguchen's body trembled. This mysterious bloodline power had never appeared in his body before. Could it have something to do with my bloodline? Yiguchen could not help but wonder. He remembered what the ancient god race's heavenly Eye King had said before. His bloodline came from the first race of the 100 races in the heavens, but it was later reduced to a taboo. Perhaps the sacred lotus has detected the bloodline hidden in my bloodline, Yiguchen thought to himself. Right at this moment, the final leaf of the Saint Lotus finally trembled and slowly bloomed. The moment it bloomed, a golden lotus seed suddenly flew out from the Saint Lotus. Yiguchen reached out and grabbed the golden lotus seed. At the same time, the 50-petaled sacred lotus opened. A blinding golden light began to spread and illuminated the sky. Let's go! Yiguchen did not hesitate. He did not even immediately investigate what the golden lotus seed was. He executed the imminent skyline movement technique and left in a flash. The sacred lotus golden light illuminated the heavens and the earth, illuminating the entire holy city of fortune as though it was daytime. What's going on? What happened? There's something happening at the sacred lotus. This strange movement instantly alarmed the entire holy city of fortune. Numerous sounds of wind breaking could be heard as experts appeared in the heavens to take a look. With a single glance, everyone's breathing seemed to have stopped. The 50-petaled sacred lotus has opened simultaneously. How is this possible? Cries of surprise could be heard from all directions. Not to mention the sky prides of the various dynasties, even the sky prides of the overlord forces were shocked. Among them was Qin Qingxiao. He took a deep breath, but he still couldn't hide the shock in his heart. With a tone of disbelief, he said, 50 leaves of the divine lotus bloomed together. Which genius created this miracle? Even Di Haotian, who is said to be a 10th grade sovereign, could only activate 49 leaves. Qin Qingxiao was really shocked. The person who could trigger the 50-petaled sacred lotus was definitely someone he could not compare to. Not to mention him, even Huang Qianqiu, who he greatly respected, could not be compared to that person. After all, this record was a level higher than Di Haotian's. Who is this person? I must not provoke him. Qin Qingxiao's heart was in turmoil. Like everyone else, he looked around but did not see the genius who had triggered the 50-petaled sacred lotus. However, this matter would not be settled just like that. It would cause a huge storm. After all, in the Nantian region, there were only a handful of people who could suppress Di Haotian in certain aspects. Chapter 12:17. The Saint Lotus had existed in the sacred city of fortune since ancient times. It was rumored that its history was as long as that of the sacred emperor realm. Countless prodigies had been tested in the Saint Lotus throughout history, but only Di Haotian had truly surpassed them all. Many people believed that 49 leaves was the limit of the Saint Lotus. They even believed that the Saint Lotus, at its most complete state, could only have 49 leaves. But now, many of the elites in the sacred city of fortune had witnessed a miracle. 50 leaves of the Saint Lotus had bloomed. What a shocking scene. Although it was late at night, the entire sacred city of fortune was alarmed. More and more prodigies from various factions had arrived. Zhao Shinkong, Zhao Weihuang, and the others from the War God dynasty had also arrived. They were equally shocked. 50 leaves of the Saint Lotus, surpassing Di Haoyan. Who is it? Zhao Shinkong and Zhao Weihuang were both shocked. Who is it? That's too amazing. Zhao Xiaodi clenched her fists, her mouth forming an O shape. Her pretty face was filled with disbelief. Crown Prince Xingyang and the others from the Sky Star dynasty, as well as the princes and princesses of the Great Qian dynasty, had also arrived. When they saw this scene, their hearts were filled with indescribable shock. Someone who could make the Saint Lotus bloom 50 leaves was too far away from them. It was as if they were from two different worlds. Of course, Jian Jinghong and the other sword sons from the Sword dynasty had also arrived to witness the scene. In addition to the factions from the dynasties, some elites from the Overlord factions had also arrived. Which Overlord faction's prodigy did it? Could it be Di Haoyan again? Impossible. I heard that Di Haoyan is preparing for Sky Burial Island. He didn't come to the sacred city of fortune. Then who is it? How many people in the Nantian domain can surpass Di Haoyan's talent? Could it be a supreme prodigy from one of the three reclusive factions? That's possible. All the elites were guessing. If they weren't from the Overlord factions, they were guessing that it was a prodigy from the reclusive factions. No one would have thought that it would be a prodigy from a dynasty who had triggered 50 leaves of the Saint Lotus. At this moment, the source of the commotion, Yiguchen, was in his residence, examining the golden lotus seed in his palm. What the hell is this? Yiguchen tried to use his soul power and true qi to investigate, but to no avail. However, since this golden lotus seed was something from the Saint Lotus, it must have some kind of use. Yiguchen guessed that this golden lotus seed should be the reward for completely opening the sacred lotus. It was just that Yiguchen did not know how to use it. For the time being, Yiguchen could only put away the golden lotus seed. Perhaps it would be useful in the future. Just which race does my bloodline originate from? How could it be so powerful? Yiguchen thought to himself. It was rumored that Di Haoyan's bloodline came from one of the 100 tribes in the universe. Coupled with his 10th grade talent, he was almost perfect. However, even Di Haoyan was unable to fully activate the Saint Lotus. From this, it could be seen that Yiguchen's bloodline had an extraordinary origin. If I want to figure out my bloodline, the only way is to go to the Heaven Mountain Sword tribe, Yiguchen thought to himself. The Heaven Mountain Sword tribe was the most important clue to solving the mystery of his origin. However, this was something Yiguchen would consider in the future. At this time, there was a knock on the door. Then, Jian Jinghong and the other sword sons entered. What's wrong? Yiguchen asked. Brother Yi, did you know that someone activated the 50 leaves of the Saint Lotus? The entire sacred city of fortune is in an uproar. Jian Jinghong exclaimed. Oh, I know. Yiguchen nodded slightly. Aren't you surprised at all? Suki Miyazaki asked in surprise. Why should I be surprised? In the era of great battles, geniuses rise and kings compete for supremacy. It's not surprising that someone appears, Yiguchen said casually. As expected of Brother Dugu. With such a temperament, we are convinced. Jian Jinghong laughed. Su Zihao said, Oh right, in a few days, there will be a trade fair in the sacred city of fortune. Brother Dugu, are you interested in taking a look? Trade fair? Yiguchen asked. That's right. At that time, various people will take out different items to trade. The variety of treasures is far from what the auction in the empire can compare to, Su Zihao explained. Sure. Yiguchen nodded slightly. It would be good if he could find some good treasures to increase his strength before the sacred emperor world opened. In the next few days, Yiguchen meditated and cultivated. More and more people also poured into the sacred city of fortune. The Tyrant Saber Empire, Phoenix Nye Empire, and Swallow Cloud Empire also arrived. However, as soon as they entered the sacred city of fortune, they received news about the Saint Lotus. 50 leaves of the lotus. Who has such strength? Princess Phoenix, she was also shocked. However, when she thought of the mission, she couldn't help but feel a little tired. As for the Swallow Cloud Empire, it was led by the retired Emperor Yan He and Yan Chang'e. Only Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and a few others participated in the Sacred Emperor world. The rest had not reached the divine dwelling stage and could only be cannon fodder. To think that there is such a peerless talent. Hearing the news about the Saint Lotus, Yan Wushuang also sighed. She couldn't help but think of Yi Guqin's outstanding performance in the Tianhuang Plains. If Yi Guqin could survive, he might not be any less outstanding than the person who attracted the Saint Lotus. Yan Wushuang thought in disappointment. Soon, a few days passed and the Sacred City of Fortune's trade fair arrived. Yi Guqin and the other 13 swordsmen went straight to an exquisite pavilion in the Sacred City of Fortune. This was the location of the trade fair. Yi Guqin and the others entered the pavilion. It was extremely spacious and could accommodate tens of thousands of cultivators. There were seats around and a high platform in the middle. At this moment, the pavilion was already filled with more than 10,000 cultivators. The arrival of Yi Guqin and the others caused quite a stir. However, no one criticized Yi Guqin. After all, Yi Guqin had used his physical strength to light up the 85th level of the martial tablet and shocked a group of people. At this moment, a group of heaven prides from the War God Empire and the Tyrant Saber Empire appeared. They were naturally hostile to Yi Guqin, but they could not have a conflict at the trade fair. Zhao Weihuang and the others just glared at Yi Guqin. Then, Chen Qingxiao appeared. Behind him was a group of princes and princesses of the Great Qian Empire. It seems that the rumors are true. The princes and princesses of the Great Qian Empire are willing to be servants and followers of Chen Qingxiao. Many people were secretly surprised to see this scene. The Great Qian Empire was ranked 12th among the 100 great empires and could not be considered weak. But now, they had all become Chen Qingxiao's followers. Chen Qingxiao also noticed Yi Guqin immediately. His eyes were cold, but he did not say anything harsh. Anyway, in his opinion, Yi Guqin's life would end at the sacred imperial world. The princes and princesses of the Great Qian Empire also sneered. They had found a backer and were not afraid of Yi Guqin. At this moment, another group of people appeared at the door. It was Crown Prince Xingyang and the others of the Heavenly Star Empire. What was more surprising was that Crown Prince Xingyang was at the front and seemed to be leading the way. A few figures slowly walked over from behind. Who is qualified to make Crown Prince Xingyang be the guide? Everyone in the pavilion was shocked. Chapter 12-18. The Heavenly Star Empire ranked 6th among the 100 great empires. It was not weak at all. Crown Prince Xingyang clearly had his own strengths to be able to become the Crown Prince of the Heavenly Star Empire. But now, he had become a guide, leading the way for someone else. This was simply unimaginable. However, when the people in the pavilion saw the 4 figures behind Crown Prince Xingyang, their surprise immediately turned into understanding. The 4 figures were none other than the 4 Star Lords of the Starry Sword Pavilion, 4 of the 7 Great Bears. I see. It's actually the 4 Star Lords. No wonder Crown Prince Xingyang would lower himself to be a guide. Many people came to a realization. The Heavenly Star Empire was backed by the Starry Sword Pavilion. Crown Prince Xingyang's status was noble, but it was nothing compared to the 4 Star Lords. The Starry Sword Pavilion. Under the ghost mask, Yi Guqin's expression became cold and stern. His grievances with the Starry Sword Pavilion had reached an irreconcilable level. Zhou Heng and Song Yuyao of the 7 Great Bears had been killed by him. Yi Guqin wanted to kill Gu Xiaoyang and the 4 Star Lords as well. Since they were all part of the 7 Great Bears, he had to make sure they died together. Please come in, Crown Prince Xingyang said with a smile. The 4 Star Lords nodded slightly. They were quadruplets and all had the surname Jiang. The eldest, Jiang Qingzong, was from the Dubhe Star. The second, Jiang Xiu, was from the Merak Star. The third, Jiang Wangqing, was from the Fekta Star. The fourth, Jiang Yuanlong, was from the Migres Star. If the 4 of them were to stand out, they would be able to sweep through an entire region. If the 4 of them worked together, even the 10 young masters would be in danger, let alone regular prodigies of the dragon rank and phoenix rank. When the 4 of them worked together, they could even exchange blows with the prodigies of the 4 emperors. As a result, the fame of the 4 Star Lords was not just for show. They were no weaker than Gu Xiaoyang. At that moment, the 4 Star Lords ignored the gazes of the others. Instead, they discussed seriously. The person who triggered 50 leaves of the Saint Lotus is truly terrifying. Even Di Haotian's record was broken by him, said Jiang Wangqing. That's right. I wonder if that person will appear in the Holy Imperial World. If he does, we can't afford to offend him. Jiang Xiu said solemnly. That's right. Even if the 4 of us work together, we may not be able to defeat them. So, when we enter the Holy Emperor World, we must be careful, Jiang Qingsong said in a deep voice. They were extremely wary of the person who had triggered the Saint Lotus. With the arrival of the 4 Star Lords, the entire pavilion became livelier and livelier. After all, the sky prides of the Overlord-level forces were starting to show themselves. However, just when everyone thought that the 4 Star Lords would be the most dazzling existences there, the 4 Star Lords became the most dazzling existences. Another figure stepped in, snatching away everyone's attention. It was a white-clothed young man. He was handsome like jade, and his figure was tall and straight. He was like a young phoenix, and he carried the aura of a king. As he stepped into the pavilion, a formless sword intent swept out in all directions. Those with weaker cultivations even let out a muffled groan as they were forced back. Their faces were filled with shock. How is this possible? It's just a strand of aura, yet it's already suppressing everything. Some people cried out involuntarily. However, when they saw who it was, everyone's eyes were filled with shock. It's the Sword King body of the Heavenly God Sword sect, Chu Xuanjin. Along with the exclamations, many people stood up with shock and awe on their faces. Among the sky prides of the Nantian region, Chu Xuanjin was definitely one of the top existences. As a 9th grade sky pride, he had the Sword King body and was born with the heart of the sword. Comprehending sword intent was as simple as eating and drinking for him. There were even some sky prides who thought that although Chu Xuanjin was one of the top 10 young masters, his true strength was almost at the level of the 4 emperors. It could be said that if the Heavenly God Sword sect did not have Di Haotian, Chu Xuanjin would be the most dazzling sky pride. However, because of Di Haotian, Chu Xuanjin's glory was overshadowed. Many people did not know Chu Xuanjin's true strength. However, no one dared to underestimate Chu Xuanjin. The Heavenly God Sword sect. Yiguchen looked at Chu Xuanjin and frowned. He suddenly rejoiced that he was able to refine Dugu Qiuma's avatar. Otherwise, Yiguchen alone would not be able to deal with Gu Xiaoyang, the 4 young Star Lords, Chu Xuanjin, and the other sky prides. So it's young Master Xuanjin. Sorry. The 4 young Star Lords stood up and said. The 4 young Star Lords did not take other people seriously. However, when facing sky prides of the same level or even stronger than them, the 4 young Star Lords would treat them with respect. Yes. Chu Xuanjin nodded slightly. The Heavenly God Sword sect and the Starry Sword Pavilion did not have much conflict. When the Heavenly God Sword sect destroyed the Su family, the Starry Sword Pavilion also helped. Therefore, the relationship between the 2 forces was quite good. When the time comes in the Sacred Emperor realm, if you meet young Master Xuanjin, I hope you will show mercy, Jiang Qingsong said with a smile. That won't be necessary. If the 4 of you join forces, I will also have a headache, Chu Xuanjin said. Looking at the 2 sides praising each other, the surrounding sky prides cursed silently. After Chu Xuanjin took his seat, the trade fair began. An old man walked up to the high platform and began to take out the first auction item. It was an imperial-level martial arts technique. Everyone, I'm sure you all know the rules of the trade fair. It is different from an auction. Instead of using celestial crystals to trade, we will use other items. The owner of this imperial-level martial arts technique will need something like sacred medicine to trade for it. The so-called trade fair was an exchange of items. Some people took out some precious items that they did not need to trade for something that they needed. They would trade with whoever could satisfy their needs. Soon, the emperor-class martial art was sold to someone for the price of 5 St. Herbs. Yiguchen just watched quietly. He had many treasures on him, but not many. If it was not something that he really needed, he would not make a move. Next, items were presented one after another and were quickly traded away. Yiguchen shook his head slightly. There was nothing that he needed. At this time, another jade slip was presented. The old man said, "This jade slip records an imperial-level martial arts technique." As soon as the introduction was made, many people immediately lost interest. Although imperial-level martial arts techniques were rare, they were not too rare. Even some dynasties had 1 or 2 imperial-level martial arts techniques, let alone the overlord-level forces. Therefore, no one was interested in this item. The old man suddenly smiled mysteriously and said, "Everyone, don't underestimate this imperial-level martial arts technique. It is said that this martial arts technique is related to one of the top 10 Archean secret skills." What? It is related to one of the top 10 Archean secret skills? Hearing the old man's words, all the sky prides immediately perked up. The top 10 Archean secret skills were the top 10 secret skills that had been passed down from the Archean era. Each secret skill had a different ability. If cultivated to the extreme, one could obtain unexpected effects and increase one's strength greatly. Now, everyone was interested. They wanted to know what kind of martial arts technique was recorded in the jade slip. Chapter 12:19. This emperor-level bodily movement technique is called distance shrinking. It's said to be an incomplete chapter of the divine movement secret skill, one of the top 10 Archean secret skills. If you can combine it with other incomplete chapters, you may get the complete inheritance of the divine movement secret skill. The old man explained. It's distance shrinking. Since it's related to the divine movement secret skill, we must get it. Yes, speed is the best martial art in the world. The divine movement secret skill represents extreme speed. After learning it, you can attack at close range and escape at will. Hearing the old man's explanation, many people's eyes lit up. Of course, there were also some calmer people. Although the divine movement secret skill is good, it's only an incomplete chapter. Who knows if we can get other incomplete chapters in the future? Yes, if we can't get it, distance shrinking is only a little better than an emperor-level bodily movement technique, some people said rationally. In short, if the real divine movement secret skill appeared, even experts of the saint realm would be tempted, let alone these talents. But if it was only an incomplete chapter, the attraction would be greatly reduced. The old man seemed to understand. He smiled faintly and said, "The guest who took out the incomplete chapter said that he needs all kinds of supreme-grade materials to forge weapons of tribulation. The one who takes out the most valuable materials will get distance shrinking." There was a discussion in the pavilion. Although the incomplete chapter was not as attractive, many people were still interested. Among them, Yiguchen was the most interested. His eyes lit up under the mask, and his heart skipped a beat. Wasn't so close, yet worlds apart, one of the incomplete chapters of the divine movement secret skill? If he could get distance shrinking and combine the two, would it become the real divine movement secret skill? If so, Yiguchen would have 2 Archean secret skills, the sky-devouring secret skill and the divine movement secret skill. By then, Yiguchen's strength would increase again. Moreover, the divine movement secret skill was extremely fast. It was very useful for both attacking and temporarily retreating. Supreme-grade materials to forge weapons of tribulation? I have them, but... Yiguchen hesitated. In fact, Yiguchen even had sacred materials, not to mention supreme-grade materials to forge weapons of tribulation. 9 orifices divine stone and mica spirit containing saliva. There was also the 10,000-year-old mica, which was slightly inferior to the sacred material. However, Yiguchen had collected all of these and was preparing to forge his own famed sword. It was impossible for him to trade it away. We can only rely on luck. Yiguchen sighed softly. Next, Yiguchen took out the Millennium mica and other materials he had collected to participate in the exchange. In the end, the results were out. Yiguchen did not obtain the earth-shrinking technique. As expected, this result was within Yiguchen's expectations. Congratulations to this young master for obtaining the earth-shrinking technique. The old man handed the jade slip to a tall and slender young master. That young master's hair was tied up with a jade crown, and his hair was so shiny that it could be used as a mirror. He was exceptionally handsome, with red lips and white teeth. His face was elegant, and his handsome eyes were filled with anger. Her peach blossom eyes, in particular, flickered with a hint of charm. Yiguchen narrowed his eyes. What surprised him was not that the young master should be a woman dressed as a man, but that he sensed that the hidden aura on her was extremely strong. Not to mention anything else, she was at least comparable to the prodigies on the Dragon Phoenix list. Interesting. There are indeed many dark horses in the battlefield of prodigies. Yiguchen thought to himself. Although the battlefield of prodigies was the stage for the prodigies of the overlord forces, there were still some dark horses in the past. Some of them had accidentally obtained some treasures and inheritances, or awakened some kind of physique. They rose against the trend and were not weaker than the supreme prodigies. He wondered if the cross-dressing young master was one of them. However, since the earth-shrinking technique had already been taken by someone else, Yiguchen could only give up. He looked away and felt that it was a pity. As for the handsome young master, he glanced at Yiguchen and looked away. The things that were displayed next were more and more precious. Even the 4-star lords and Chu Xuanzhen took 1 or 2 shots. However, those things did not mean much to Yiguchen. Just as Yiguchen was about to get up and leave, the old man on the high platform suddenly revealed a strange smile and said, "Everyone, the next item is the last item of this trade fair. However, it doesn't seem to be an item. What is that? Could it be a demon beast? Don't keep us in suspense." Everyone in the pavilion became interested. Even Chu Xuanzhen, who had a calm expression on his face, cast his gaze over with interest. Next, someone brought up an iron cage covered with a cloth. The old man reached out and lifted the cloth. In the iron cage was a girl of 17 or 18 years old. The girl's light yellow dress was torn in many places and dirty, but it could not hide her beauty. Her petite body was curled up in the iron cage, shivering. Her almond-shaped eyes were filled with tears, and she looked very lovely. Seeing the girl in the iron cage, everyone present was stunned and puzzled. This young girl was indeed very beautiful. However, the majority of the people present were people of extraordinary status. It was not as if they had never seen a beautiful young girl before. "May I ask what's so special about this girl? If she's just an ordinary girl, she won't be attractive to us," many prodigies said. If she's just an ordinary girl, we won't let her in. This girl's identity is very special," the old man said with a smile. "Oh, what's her identity?" Chen Qingxiao tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair and said calmly. "She's from the Su family," the old man said. The old man's words caused an uproar. Many prodigies were surprised as they stared at the beautiful girl in the iron cage. That girl was from the Su family? The Su family was once an overlord family and was one of the 5 great families. Later, it was destroyed by a group of forces led by the Heavenly Godsword sect. However, a centipede died but did not fall down. After all, the Su family was an overlord family. Even if it was destroyed, there would be a small number of people who survived. For example, Su Jianchu's family had fled to the Saint Origin dynasty to avoid being hunted down. Of course, there might be a small number of Su family members who were still alive and waiting for a chance to take revenge. Over the years, the Heavenly Godsword sect and other forces had been capturing some powerful survivors of the Su family. From time to time, some Su family members would be found by the Heavenly Godsword sect and then killed. However, this girl from the Su family clearly didn't have much strength. She just had a special identity. The Su family. Yiguchen's gaze fell on the beautiful girl. Looking at the trembling young girl in the iron cage, he said, "Don't worry." Yiguchen thought of Su Jianchu again. She once said in despair that the Su family's destruction was all because of her. The Su family's misery was also because of her. Su Jianshi blamed herself. Therefore, even if it was for Su Jianshi, Yiguchen couldn't ignore this girl from the Su family. Chapter 12:20. Everyone, this young lady from the Su clan is very clean and has not been tainted in any way. That customer's request is to exchange for pills or treasures that can increase one's comprehension ability. Whoever takes out the most precious item will have this young lady from the Su clan, the old man said slowly. Hearing the old man's words, some of the prodigies present had a hint of passion in their eyes. If she was just an ordinary girl, no matter how beautiful she was, she would not have aroused their interest. However, her identity as a member of the Su family greatly increased her charm. That feeling was as if someone who was once high and unreachable could now kneel in front of them. For some men, that feeling was extremely satisfying. Feeling some of the gazes on her, the beautiful girl in the iron cage trembled. She hugged her chest with her arms and her almond-shaped eyes were covered with a layer of mist. Soon, some people began to take out items and wanted to exchange. However, treasures that could increase comprehension ability were really rare. Therefore, many people could only watch helplessly. I have a 10,000-year-old musk here. After igniting it, it can increase your comprehension ability. At that moment, the handsome young man who had bid for the distance shrinking into an inch earlier deliberately said in a low voice. The handsome young man's gaze also fell on the girl from the Su family. Oh my God, it's a 10,000-year-old musk. He even has such a good item. Many prodigies were speechless and found it unbelievable. This 10,000-year-old musk was very beneficial to one's comprehension and cultivation after igniting it. It was very rare. It was a bit of a loss to exchange such a treasure for a girl, even if the girl was from the Su family. Yiguchen had a strange look in his eyes. If he was not wrong, that handsome young man should be a woman dressed as a man. Why did she bid for the girl from the Su family? However, at that moment, Chu Xuanjin also said, I'll offer 10 enlightenment pills. 10 enlightenment pills. Many people around him sucked in a cold breath. The enlightenment pill was an extremely rare sacred pill. Its raw material was the leaves of the enlightenment ancient tree. There was only one sacred medicine like the enlightenment ancient tree in the entire heavenly god sword sect. It could be seen how generous Chu Xuanjin was. Many prodigies were puzzled. Chu Xuanjin was not the kind of person who was blinded by lust. With his status, he did not have to worry about not having enough girls. What was he trying to do by bidding for the girl from the Su family with 10 enlightenment pills? Little did they know that Chu Xuanjin was thinking about something else at that moment. Senior brother Haoyan once said that the blood of the Su family would be of some help in unsealing the mortal emperor's sword. If I were to bring this young woman back, perhaps she would be able to help senior brother Haoyan, Chu Xuanjin thought to himself. The handsome young master frowned and looked at Chu Xuanjin. His peach blossom eyes surged with coldness. After the old man finished asking, he returned and said, If no one else bids, then this young lady from the Su family will be obtained by young Master Chu. Hearing this, everyone present looked at each other in dismay, all of them remaining silent. Not to mention that they couldn't take out a treasure better than the Tao comprehension pill. Even if he could take it out, it was impossible for him to snatch it from Chu Xuanjin's hands. It was no different from snatching food from a tiger's mouth. There was no need to offend Chu Xuanjin for a girl from the Su family. A faint smile appeared on Chu Xuanjin's face. The misty almond-shaped eyes of the Su family's young lady in the iron cage also revealed a look of despair. She knew that with her status as a member of the Su family, falling into the hands of the heavenly god sword sect would definitely not end well. At this moment, a calm voice suddenly sounded. I want this young lady. As for the Tao comprehension pill, I believe that it won't disappoint that person. Hearing this, there was dead silence in the pavilion. Many people thought that they had misheard and were hallucinating. Didn't they see that this was the person Chu Xuanjin wanted? Who would dare to snatch someone from Chu Xuanjin? Everyone's eyes suddenly turned to the source of the voice. When they saw the person who spoke, the corners of many elites' mouths twitched. It was Yiguchen. It's that Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty again. Is he really not afraid of causing too much trouble? Yeah, he offended the various dynasties and Qin Qingshao at the martial tablet. Now, he even dares to offend young Master Xuanzhen. Many people were stunned and shook their heads. They felt that Yi Guqin was digging his own grave. Offending Chu Xuanzhen, one of the top 10 young masters, on the eve of the opening of the sacred imperial world was tantamount to digging his own grave. The smile on Chu Xuanzhen's face slowly disappeared. Given his status, there shouldn't be many young people who dared to offend him. At least the elites of the dynasties were not qualified to do so. Even Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty was the same. As I expected, he's really stupid. Qin Qingshao couldn't help but sneer. Those who were hostile to Yi Guqin also sneered. Well, the old man hesitated and looked at Chu Xuanzhen. Chu Xuanzhen said indifferently, "Let's have a fair competition." He didn't think that Yi Guqin could offer something more valuable than 10 enlightenment pills. Then, Yi Guqin went directly to the private room at the back and secretly took out the things he wanted to exchange. Then he returned to his seat. Many people were curious. Could Yi Guqin's things be better than Chu Xuanzhen's? In less than 15 minutes, the old man came back and looked at Yi Guqin strangely. Then he announced, "The guest has decided, the girl of the Su family will belong to." Chu Xuanzhen smiled. "Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty." The old man shouted. The smile on Chu Xuanzhen's face froze. Everyone present also looked at Yi Guqin in shock. Chu Xuanzhen's things are better than his? That's unbelievable. However, only Yi Guqin knew that the result was normal. This was because Yi Guqin had taken out a branch from the Tree of Enlightenment, along with dozens of Tree of Enlightenment leaves. As long as that person wasn't a fool, he would know what to choose. This time, Chu Xuanzhen was in a dilemma. He calmed himself down and turned to look at Yi Guqin. "Jian Kuei, I know you're in a bad situation now. I'll give you a chance. Give the girl of the Su family to me and I can reluctantly accept you as my follower. No one in the Holy Emperor realm will dare to touch you." Chu Xuanzhen's words made Zhao Weihuang, Qin Qingshao, and the princes and princesses of the great Qian dynasty change their expressions. If Chu Xuanzhen protected him, no one in the Holy Emperor realm would dare to attack Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin's lips curled into a faint smile. Chu Xuanzhen continued, "Of course, not only that, you might have a chance to go to the Heavenly God Sword sect in the future. You might be rewarded by senior brother Haoyan and even become his follower. That's a blessing that you can't get in 3 lifetimes." Chu Xuanzhen couldn't hide his admiration when he mentioned Di Haoyan. However, Yi Guqin's eyes flashed with sharpness. He was already tired of Chu Xuanzhen's condescending tone. When he mentioned Di Haoyan, Yi Guqin was filled with killing intent. "I only have one thing to say," Yi Guqin said indifferently. "What is it?" Chu Xuanzhen narrowed his eyes. "Who do you think you are? Who does Di Haoyan think he is?" Chapter 12:21. Yi Guqin's words echoed throughout the pavilion. Instantly, everyone's brains seemed to have short-circuited. Many people even thought that they were hallucinating. What did Yi Guqin say? Who are Chu Xuanzhen and Di Haoyan? After a short moment of silence, there was an endless uproar and shock. Crazy, Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty is definitely crazy. Yeah, he's hopeless. Not only did he offend Qin Qingshao and the others, but now he even dares to insult young Master Xuanzhen and Haoyan True Dragon. Who gave him the courage? He's really a frog at the bottom of the well who doesn't know the immensity of the world. In the entire Nantian region, who has the right to say such words? There was an uproar. They were all shocked by Yi Guqin's words. Chu Xuanzhen's face immediately darkened. Yi Guqin's words were not only contempt for him, but also an insult to Di Haoyan. "Do you know how ignorant and stupid your words are?" Chu Xuanzhen said coldly. "I don't think there's anything wrong with it," Yi Guqin said calmly. He was the only person among the younger generation in the Nantian region who could seriously injure Di Haoyan. Chu Xuanzhen said that he wanted him to become Di Haoyan's follower, which was too ridiculous. Of course, this was also because Chu Xuanzhen didn't know Yi Guqin's true identity. Jian Kuei really doesn't know how to spell the word death. Chen Qingxiao and the other enemies were watching coldly from the sidelines. How could they offend someone as powerful as one of the top 10 young masters? Chu Xuanzhen's sword qi flowed around his body, and a vast pressure pressed down on Yi Guqin like an avalanche. Yi Guqin, on the other hand, stood with his hands behind his back. His aura was restrained and he was like a reef in the storm, not moving at all. Chu Xuanzhen's eyes were deep. Jian Kuei, who was rumored to have his spiritual residence destroyed by Huang Qianqiu, didn't seem to be that simple. At this moment, the old man in charge of the trade fair also said, "Young Master Xuanzhen, this is the trade fair. Please calm down." In truth, the old man was also somewhat displeased. Just now, it was Chu Xuanzhen who said it was a fair competition. In the end, Yi Guqin got the girl from the Su family, and Chu Xuanzhen wanted to snatch her away. Chu Xuanzhen was completely unreasonable. Okay. Chu Xuanzhen took a deep breath and calmed down. It was indeed not good for him to act up at the trade fair. After that, the trade fair came to an end. Chu Xuanzhen did not do anything. He just glanced at Yi Guqin indifferently. However, Yi Guqin caught the murderous intent that flashed through his eyes. Yi Guqin did not mind. All the grudges would be settled in the holy imperial universe. Chen Qingxiao and the others sneered. The enemies that Yi Guqin had provoked were simply too many. Many people wondered if Yi Guqin had been killed as soon as he entered the holy imperial universe. Therefore, many of the dynasty's prodigies looked at Yi Guqin sympathetically. Even Jian Jinghong, Xuanlian, and the others looked very serious. They did not blame Yi Guqin for provoking Chu Xuanzhen and the others. If it were them, they would not be able to tolerate the arrogance and overbearingness of Chu Xuanzhen and the other overlord prodigies. Jian Kuei, this girl from the Su family is yours. There is a restriction in her body. She is no different from an ordinary person. She can't fight back at all, the old man said as he handed over a jade talisman. With this jade talisman, he could remove the restriction in the girl from the Su family. What are you waiting for? The old man said. The iron cage was opened, and the girl from the Su family trembled as she walked out. Although she was a little dirty, she was delicate and pretty, and her looks were not ordinary. Especially her pair of almond-shaped eyes that were filled with tears, she looked very pitiful. At this moment, the girl from the Su family was very nervous and uneasy. Fortunately, she was not exchanged with Chu Xuanzhen from the Heavenly God Sword sect. However, she did not know what Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty was thinking. Would he do anything overboard to her? At the thought of this, the girl from the Su family felt a little uneasy. Then, the people from the Sword Dynasty left the pavilion. On the street, Yi Guqin's heart skipped a beat. He sensed that someone had been watching him in the dark. He stopped in his tracks and said, "Brother Jinghong, you guys go back first. I have something else to do." When Jian Jinghong and the others heard this, they were slightly stunned. They then looked at the girl from the Su family behind Yi Guqin. It was inevitable that there would be some misunderstanding. When the girl from the Su family heard Yi Guqin's words, her delicate body trembled like a little white rabbit. Tears welled up in her eyes. Yi Guqin, in particular, was wearing a ghost mask on his face, which made her tremble with fear. "Master, you have to be careful," Mu Xingzu said naturally. She was the person who believed in Yi Guqin's character the most. He would never do anything to the girl from the Su family. Then, Jian Jinghong and the others left. Yi Guqin took the girl from the Su family and walked aimlessly. "What's your name?" Yi Guqin asked while walking. "I'm called Su Qiqing." The girl from the Su family named Su Qiqing said. "Besides you, are there any other survivors from the Su family?" Yi Guqin continued to ask. Su Qiqing pursed her lips. She was very vigilant and did not say a word. "Seems like there are other Su family members," Yi Guqin said. But thinking about it, it was normal. After all, the Su family was once one of the 5 hegemonic families. As the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Although a hegemonic family could be destroyed because of a siege, it was impossible for all of them to die. There would always be a small number of people who managed to escape. If we can get in touch with those Su family members who escaped, They might be a force to deal with Heavenly God Sword sect in the future. Yi Guchen muttered in his heart. He had a premonition that in the future, there would definitely be a great war with Heavenly God Sword sect, Starry Sword Pavilion, and other forces. At that time, Yi Guchen alone would definitely not be able to reverse the situation. He would need to unite the forces of all sides. Even if the remaining forces of the Su family were unable to become a force, they were still a force that could not be ignored. Then, Yi Guchen brought Su Qiqing to a dark and empty alley. What are you going to do? Su Qiqing shrank back and retreated step by step. Tears flowed down uncontrollably. In this kind of environment, this kind of action. In Su Qiqing's heart, there was an 80% chance that something bad was going to happen. Don't worry, I will never hurt the Su family. Yi Guchen slowly raised his hand and took off the strange ghost mask on his face, revealing a handsome face. His gaze was very gentle and clear, without any distracting thoughts. So handsome, Su Qiqing's tear-stained jade cheeks were slightly stunned. She did not expect that under that terrifying ghost mask, there would be such a handsome face. Coupled with Yi Guchen's gentle tone, Su Qiqing's uneasy heart gradually calmed down. He doesn't seem to be a bad person? Su Qiqing thought. Looking at Su Qiqing's appearance, Yi Guchen finally understood why she was captured. Her temperament was indeed somewhat pure. But right now, the most important thing was not Su Qiqing's matter. Yi Guchen suddenly spoke. Come out, there's no need to follow behind. Do you think I didn't notice you? Chapter 12:22. Su Qiqing was slightly taken aback. Yi Guchen didn't seem to be talking to her. Are you still not coming out? Then I'll really take this little girl away, Yi Guchen said. It's rumored that Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty had his spiritual abode destroyed. I didn't expect his soul perception to still be so sharp. When did you find out? A clear and beautiful voice sounded like a warbler leaving the valley. At the entrance of the dark alley, a handsome young man with a jade crown and hair tied up walked in. His face was incomparably handsome, and his peach blossom eyes were watery, which was extremely lethal to both men and women. However, at this moment, his eyes were cold as he stared at Yi Guchen. Especially after Yi Guchen brought Su Qiqing into the dark alley, it made his heart even colder. In his opinion, Yi Guchen probably didn't bring Su Qiqing to this corner for any good reason. He could only do those kinds of dirty things. Should I call you brother or miss? Yi Guchen said indifferently. I didn't expect that the dignified Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty would actually do such dirty things. Previously, when I saw that you were unyielding and confronted Chu Xuanzhen and the others head-on, I thought you were a character. In the end, it's hard to tell what's in a person's heart. This handsome young man who was disguised as a man seemed to be quite disappointed with Yi Guchen. No. Su Qiqing stammered and wanted to explain. She could see that Yi Guchen really didn't have any dirty thoughts about her. Yi Guchen frowned slightly and said, Miss, you're being a little presumptuous to judge the character of others without knowing anything. Isn't that so? The handsome young man raised his eyebrows slightly. It's not like that. He has no ill intentions towards me, Su Qiqing said. You're so naive that you'll be caught by others. The handsome young man seemed to be a little disappointed. Yi Guchen's eyes dimmed. From her tone, she seemed to care about Su Qiqing. Could it be? Yi Guchen had a thought. Su Qiqing also noticed it, and a hint of confusion flashed across her eyes. She seemed to have heard that handsome young master's voice somewhere before. Hand over the girl, the handsome young master said. Why? Yi Guchen asked. Since you've seen through my disguise, you naturally know that I won't do anything to her. The handsome prince seemed to be angered by Yi Guchen, and his chest began to rise and fall. Who knows? Yi Guchen said. Then let me see just how much ability you, the Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty, have. The handsome young master suddenly attacked, his jade-like palm brushing out. All of a sudden, the powerful strength of the seventh layer of the divine dwelling erupted. So powerful! Su Qiqing exclaimed. She did not expect this handsome young master to be so powerful. Yiguchen also raised his eyebrows. The handsome young master's strength was indeed beyond his expectations. He was almost one of the top geniuses in the South Horizon region. Who is she, and what is her identity? Yiguchen was full of doubts. However, Yiguchen did not surrender. He did not use the power of the flawless divine dwelling in his body, but purely used the power of his physical body. Yiguchen's physical strength had lit up 85 levels of the martial steel, and it was enough to sweep across one side. However, after a few exchanges, Yiguchen discovered that the handsome young master's moves were mostly probing, and he did not really want to kill him. Obviously, the handsome young master did not want to fight to the death with Yiguchen. After a few exchanges, the handsome young master's peach blossom eyes revealed a strange light. Although Yiguchen did not use his genuine chi, his powerful physical strength was enough to surprise people. Jiankui, your strength is really beyond my expectations. It seems that it won't be that easy for Chu Xuanzhen and the others to kill you. Although the handsome young master did not use his full strength, his cultivation was still at the 7th layer of the divine dwelling. It was already very good that Yiguchen could exchange blows with her. But she did not know that Yiguchen was also far from using his full strength. You two please stop fighting. Qiqing knows that you are not bad people, Su Qiqing advised. The handsome young master and Yiguchen stopped fighting at the same time. Yiguchen said indifferently, since you want Su Qiqing to follow you, then let her follow you. Oh, you are willing to give this little girl to me? The handsome young master's flawless face revealed a look of surprise. She did not know why Yiguchen's attitude had changed. Because I know that not only will you not harm her, you will also take good care of her. Yiguchen smiled indifferently. In his heart, he already had some guesses about the identity of this handsome young master. In exchange for this girl, you should have paid a high price. Are you really willing to give her to me? The handsome young master asked. Why not? It's just a small price. Besides, I have already become enemies with Chu Xuanzhen. It may not be a good thing for Su Qiqing to be by my side. On the contrary, you are more likely to take care of her. Yiguchen was very carefree. The handsome young master stared blankly at Yiguchen, a strange look flashing across her sparkling peach blossom eyes. She cupped her hands slightly at Yiguchen and said, Sorry, I misunderstood you before. I apologize here. Yiguchen shook his head slightly and did not care. The handsome young master thought for a moment, then took out a jade slip and said, I saw that you also wanted to exchange for this at the trade fair. Maybe it will be useful to you. Here, I will give it to you. Yiguchen's eyes flashed when he looked at it. This jade slip contained its spatial shrinking technique. Jiankui, you don't have to refuse. I have already made a copy, so this jade slip is useless to me. Yiguchen nodded and reached out to receive it. He was not a pretentious person. This spatial shrinking technique was indeed very useful to him. Next, Yiguchen took out the jade talisman with the restriction and crushed it. Suddenly, the aura in Su Qiqing's body recovered, and the restriction was broken. She also had a cultivation of the 3rd layer of the divine dwelling stage. Her strength was not weak. You should follow this girl well in the future. She will not treat you badly, Yiguchen said. Thank you. Su Qiqing sincerely thanked him. Although she was also very puzzled as to why Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty would take care of her, a member of the Su family. But she did not ask any more questions. Then we shall part for now. But, you seem to particularly dislike forces like the Heavenly God Sword Sect and the Starry Sword Pavilion. The handsome young master said with a deep meaning. Yiguchen did not evade and directly said, Yes, I dislike them very much. If I meet them, I want to kill them. The handsome young master suddenly chuckled. Then perhaps there is a possibility of us working together in the battlefield of the heavenly prides. Yiguchen nodded. It was better to have one more friend than one more enemy. The handsome young master was about to leave with Su Qiqing, but she paused and looked back with a smile. By the way, I forgot to tell you my name. I am Enai Shang. After speaking, the tomboy named Enai Shang blinked her beautiful peach blossom eyes, and there was a hint of coquettishness in her charming eyes. When Su Qiqing heard the name Enai Shang, her beautiful eyes suddenly widened. So you are? Su Qiqing could not help but speak, but she was immediately interrupted by Enai Shang. Let's go. Enai Shang pulled Su Qiqing's hand and left. Chapter 12:23. Enai Shang, interesting. Yiguchen was deep in thought as he watched Enai Shang and Su Qiqing leave. Logically speaking, with Enai Shang's strength at the 7th level of the divine dwelling realm, it was impossible for her to be unknown among the younger generation of the South Sky region. Even if she couldn't become one of the 10 great young masters, she should at least be on the Dragon Phoenix list. However, Enai Shang's name wasn't on the Dragon Phoenix list. Could it be that it's really as I guessed? Her identity? Yiguchen pondered. Yiguchen shook his head slightly and put this matter aside for the time being. He believed that he might have some interactions with Enai Shang in the future, so he wasn't in a hurry to think about her identity. I'd better go back into seclusion first and see if I can combine shrinking Earth into an inch and so close, yet worlds apart to deduce the complete immemorial divine technique. After Yiguchen returned, Jian Jinghong and the others also noticed that Su Qiqing didn't follow him back. However, they didn't ask too much. After all, that was Yiguchen's own business. In the following time, Yiguchen prepared to start comprehending shrinking Earth into an inch and see if he could combine it with so close, yet worlds apart to deduce the cultivation method of the divine technique. However, at that moment, Yiguchen's expression suddenly changed, and a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. They're finally here. At the same time, a few black ships appeared outside the sacred city of Fortune. On the deck of the leading ship stood Dugu Qiuma and Princess Luoho. The prodigy of the Mola dynasty is here. Is that white-haired young man Dugu Qiuma, who has risen to fame recently? He indeed has an extraordinary aura. Yes, I heard that Dugu Qiuma could even fight with Gu Xiaoyang of the Star Universe Sword Pavilion without being at a disadvantage. In that case, doesn't the Mola dynasty have a prodigy at the level of one of the 10 great young masters this time? That's not necessarily true. Who knows if Gu Xiaoyang did his best at that time? Dugu Qiuma's arrival caused a lot of discussion in the sacred city of Fortune. After all, during this period of time, various news about Dugu seeking a demon had spread to many empires. Many people believed that Dugu Qiuma was definitely on the same level as Zhao Shinkong and Jian Jinghong, standing at the pinnacle of the dynasty's prodigies and comparable to the prodigies of the overlord-level forces. Qiuemo, perhaps we can first go to the Martial Tablet and Saint Lotus to test our cultivation potential and assess our strength, said Princess Luoho. Sure, I'm also very curious about my current level, Dugu Qiuma said with a faint smile. However, I've heard that someone in the holy city of good fortune once caused the 50 leaves of the holy lotus to bloom. I wonder who it was. Princess Luoho's tone was a little surprised. She was obviously very surprised by this news. Dugu Qiuma smiled but didn't say anything. He naturally knew who it was that had triggered the 50 leaves of the Saint Lotus. Next, Dugu begged Demon and Princess Luoho to head to the location of the Martial Steel's Divine Lotus. This move also attracted the attention of a large number of people. After all, the Mola dynasty was ranked 3rd, and Dugu Qiuma's reputation was not weak. They all wanted to know what level Dugu Qiuma's cultivation and talent had reached. Soon, Dugu Qiuma arrived at the testing location. Princess Luoho was the first to test. She held the death scythe that had transformed into a 10th tribulation divine weapon. She gathered the true qi in her body and slashed at the martial tablet with the scythe. Boom! Waves of air surged as the martial tablet lit up. It rushed to the 87th step. Then, Princess Luoho landed in front of the Saint Lotus again and placed her snow-white hand on it to test it. She had the Fiend Star Luoho birth chart, so her talent was definitely not low. As expected, the Holy Lotus had a total of 36 leaves. This was definitely not a low number. As expected of Princess Luoho, her battle prowess and talent are not inferior to the prodigies of the Overlord-level forces. I wonder how Dugu Qiuma will perform? No one was surprised by Princess Luoho's test results. However, compared to Princess Luoho, they were more interested in how Dugu Chioma would perform. Princess Luoho's gaze also landed on Dugu Chioma. She also wanted to know how amazing her man's performance would be. Dugu Chioma's expression was indifferent. He clenched his fist and threw a simple punch at the martial tablet. Violent blood-red Azura True Chi surged out of the Azura Divine Residence and wrapped around his arm like a blood-red ribbon. Boom! Accompanied by an earth-shattering explosion, the martial tablet lit up with an incomparably dazzling light. In the end, the light stopped at the 90-second step. This. Gasps could be heard from all directions. Dugu Chioma's battle prowess index was so high that it made one's hair stand on end. Beyond the 90th step, his battle prowess was comparable to the 10 great young masters. In fact, he could even go toe-to-toe with the 4 sovereigns. He's so powerful. Many people's breathing quickened. Their eyes were filled with anticipation and curiosity. If Dugu Chioma was so powerful, how talented would he be? Would there be someone among the dynasty's prodigies who could crush the overlord forces? The various dynasty's prodigies were all excited. At this moment, the people from the other dynasties also rushed over after hearing the news. Zhao Shinkong, Zhao Weihuang, Zhao Xiaodi, and the others from the War God dynasty. The princes and princesses of the Great Qian dynasty. Crown Prince Xingyang and the others from the Sky Star dynasty. Of course, there was also a group of people who attracted everyone's attention. That group of people had long sabers on their backs, and they had a strong and surging saber chi. It's the people from the tyrannical Saber dynasty. Many people were shocked. They did not expect that even the tyrannical Saber dynasty would be alarmed by Dugu Chioma. The leader of the tyrannical Saber dynasty team had 3 sabers on his back. He had a cold and arrogant aura, and he was also paying attention to Dugu Chioma. It's the top saber of the tyrannical Saber dynasty, Zhang Sun Aojue. Many people looked at the arrogant man with surprise. The top saber of the tyrannical Saber dynasty was extremely powerful. His 3 saber techniques were invincible in the tyrannical Saber dynasty. At this moment, Dugu Chioma was the center of attention. He walked in front of the sacred lotus and placed his hand on it. Compared to Yiguchen, there was no need for him to hide too much. The sacred lotus began to emit light, and the lotus petals bloomed one by one. Then, the lotus petals bloomed at an extremely fast speed while everyone watched in shock. 12 petals, 13 petals, 25 petals, 26 petals, 38 petals, 39 petals. When the number of lotus petals bloomed exceeded 40, everyone present felt their scalps go numb. Could it be that they were witnessing a miracle today? 46 petals, 47 petals, 48 petals, everyone's breathing quickened as if they were the ones doing the test. Their hearts were in their throats. In the end, everyone watched. The 49th lotus petal slowly bloomed. There was dead silence. There were clearly tens of thousands of people present, but at this moment, there was no sound at all. Many people opened their mouths silently, and it was as if thunder was rumbling in their minds. Zhao Xiaodi covered her mouth in disbelief, as if she had seen a miracle. After a short moment of dead silence, there was an uproar that shook the sky. A dynasty's genius had risen to the top and was on par with Di Haotian's record. Everyone was shocked. Chapter 12:24. A strong uproar spread like a tide. Many people even thought that they were seeing things. They rubbed their eyes and continued to look. The result was still the same. Dugu Chioma's holy lotus had 49 petals, which was the same as Di Haotian's true dragon and Di Haotian's. What kind of shocking scene was this? Di Haotian's extraordinary was no longer needed to be described in words. In many people's minds, few young geniuses could stand shoulder to shoulder with Di Haotian, apart from some of the geniuses of the 3 hidden forces. Even someone as strong as Huang Qianxiu had always regarded Di Haotian as a goal to surpass. But now, a genius from a dynasty had been tested to stand shoulder to shoulder with Di Haotian. What did this mean? Everyone was shocked to the core. Putting aside his battle prowess, at least in terms of talent, Dugu Chioma was definitely not weaker than Di Haotian. Many people looked at the 49-petaled holy lotus and could not calm down for a long time. Is he that powerful? Zhao Xiaodi was shocked. Her talent was already amazing. During the holy lotus test, she had triggered 39 petals, which amazed everyone. But compared to Dugu Qiumo's results, it was nothing. Zhao Shinkong, Zhao Weihuang, and the others also had shocked and grave expressions on their faces. Dugu Qiumo's performance could not be described as amazing. It had subverted everyone's imagination. Fortunately, we don't have any conflicts with Dugu Qiumo, otherwise, he would definitely be a strong enemy in the Holy Emperor realm, Zhao Shinkong said solemnly. Even he said so, it was obvious that he was afraid of Dugu Qiumo. Yes, not only do we not have any conflicts with Dugu Qiumo, but we also have a common goal. Zhao Weihuang also felt lucky and smiled. The common goal he was referring to was naturally the 13 swordsmen led by Yi Guqin. But Zhao Weihuang did not know that Dugu Qiumo was Yi Guqin's clone. Zhang Sun Aojue and the others from the Tyrant Blade dynasty were also shocked. The princes and princesses of the Great Qian dynasty were also shocked and in awe. Only Crown Prince Xingyang and the others from the Heavenly Star dynasty didn't look too good. This was because Crown Prince Xingyang knew that Dugu Qiumo had a conflict with Gu Xiaoyang. The Heavenly Star dynasty belonged to the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, so Crown Prince Xingyang naturally didn't want to see Dugu begging demons like this. There are really many dark horses in this Sky Pride battlefield. First, there was a ruthless person who managed to trigger 50 leaves of the Saint Lotus, surpassing Di Haoyan. Now, there's another person who's on par with Di Haoyan. That's right. I'm looking forward to seeing how Dugu Qiumo performs in the Holy Imperial Universe. If he runs into Di Haoyan in the future, will he be able to defeat him? I'm afraid that's a little difficult. Although his talent is on par with Di Haoyan's, it doesn't represent his strength. The debate about whether Di Haoyan or Dugu Qiumo was stronger. Most people still thought that Di Haoyan had the absolute advantage. At this moment, Dugu Qiumo frowned and said, "Only on par with Di Haoyan?" Dugu Qiumo seemed to be dissatisfied with this result. He had 5 talents, the talent of the soul-devouring clan, and the inheritance of the Azura Sage King. Dugu Qiumo wasn't surprised by this result. Instead, he was somewhat dissatisfied. According to his expectations, his results should be the same as Yi Guqin's. But now, he was only on par with Di Haoyan. Hearing Dugu Qiumo's words, the surrounding Sky Prides were shocked. Only on par with Di Haoyan? The word "only" was very spiritual. Is this even human? Many Sky Prides from various dynasties thought to themselves. This was a result that others couldn't even dream of. Even Princess Luo Ho was speechless. She said, "Qiumo, this is already a very good result." I know. Dugu Qiumo nodded slightly. The test had come to an end. Many people were also sighing. If it weren't for the mysterious Sky Pride who triggered 50 leaves of the Saint Lotus, Dugu Qiumo would have been on par with Di Haoyan. Dugu Qiumo's result today was definitely outstanding. Just as Dugu Qiumo was about to leave, a voice rang out. "Brother Dug, please wait." Dugu Qiumo stopped in his tracks and looked at the person who had spoken. The person who had stopped him was Zhao Weihuang. "What is it?" Dugu Qiumo raised his eyebrows and asked. He wasn't interested in talking to this person who was destined to be his enemy. Zhao Weihuang smiled faintly and said, "In the last war between dynasties, the Mola dynasty also suffered a great loss. You also lost saints." "What are you trying to say?" Dugu Qiumo's tone was cold. The Sword dynasty is the common enemy of all 3 dynasties. I wonder if Brother Dugu Qiumo is interested in killing the 13 swordsmen in the Holy Imperial world? Zhao Weihuang smiled faintly as if he was very confident that the Mola dynasty would work with them. Before Dugu Qiumo could say anything, Princess Luo Ho said, "That would be best." In the last war, the people sent by the Mola dynasty were also all killed. Not to mention, I have some conflicts with Yi Guqin. Brother Dugu Qiumo Ho, your princess has agreed. What about you? Zhao Weihuang asked. Dugu Qiumo's eyes flickered and then he said, "Sure." Then I look forward to working with you. Zhao Weihuang laughed heartily. With Dugu Qiumo Ho's help, Zhao Weihuang was almost 100% confident that they could kill the 13 swordsmen in the Holy Imperial world. Now the Sword Dynasty is really in trouble. Yes, Duguqima Ho is too strong. Even if the Jiankui's spiritual abode was not destroyed, it would be difficult for him to deal with Duguqima. Many people around shook their heads as if they could already see the scene of the 13 swordsmen slaughtering the Holy Imperial world. Duguqima's test results shook the entire Holy City of Fortune. Not only was his combat strength extraordinary, but his aptitude was even comparable to the true dragon of Haotian. Even Princess Luo Ho's birth mother, the Demon Queen, was shocked. She was glad that she had a good eye. For a time, Duguqima was in the limelight in the Holy City of Fortune. It was so much so that some people from the overlord-level powers had already begun to contact Duguqima, wanting to pull him into their faction. However, Duguqima Ho declined. He did not forget his promise with which one. Other things aside, the Demonic Destruction sect had the Demonic Destruction Heart Sutra that Duguqima needed. Therefore, if there was a chance, Duguqima would still join the Demonic Destruction sect. On the other side, Jian Jinghong, Xuanlian, Mu Xingzhu, and the others found Yiguchen. The situation is not good. Duguqima Ho is too strong. If even he targets the Sword Dynasty, we will be in a very passive situation. Jian Jinghong frowned. When he heard the results of Duguqima Ho's test, he was also shocked. Later, he heard that Zhao Weihuang had found Duguqima Ho and wanted to join forces with him to deal with the Sword Dynasty. Don't worry. Yiguchen smiled faintly, looking very calm. If Zhao Weihuang knew that Duguqima Ho was only one of his avatars, what kind of expression would Zhao Weihuang have? Chapter 12:25. The reason why Duguqima agreed to Zhao Weihuang's request. It was just to make it easier for him to attack in the future. When the time came, Duguqima would give his enemies a big surprise. Are you sure we don't have to worry? Mu Xingzhu was also worried. However, she had always trusted Yiguchen. When she saw Yiguchen's calm expression, she regained her composure. That's right. Since it's the truth, we'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way. The Sword Dynasty is not that easy to bully. Jian Jinghong also smiled. So what if Duguqima was strong? Could he kill them all in an instant? Looking at the Sword Sons who treated Duguqima as their mortal enemy, Yiguchen was speechless. In fact, Duguqima was an ally. However, Yiguchen did not explain much. After all, everyone would know when the time came. After that, they did not disturb Yiguchen's cultivation. Yiguchen was also deeply comprehending the two ultimate techniques, so close, yet worlds apart and distance reduction. During this time, Yiguchen also used the Enlightenment Leaf and other treasures to aid in his comprehension. After a few days, the day of the opening of the Holy Imperial world finally arrived. At this time, Yiguchen, who was sitting cross-legged in his room, suddenly opened his eyes. He felt enlightened. Finally, I've succeeded. Yiguchen heaved a sigh of relief. He did not expect that he would be able to completely integrate these two techniques before the opening of the Holy Imperial world and derive the immemorial divine movement secret skill. However, this was also thanks to Yiguchen's monstrous comprehension. Otherwise, if it were anyone else, even if they could derive the divine movement secret skill, it would probably take a lot of time. Yiguchen's sky-devouring secret skill had a total of 5 levels. The complete version of the divine movement secret skill that he had derived was divided into 4 levels: Chasing Lightning, Chasing Light, Void Treading, and Astral Wander. Chasing Lightning, as the name suggested, after reaching this level, one's movements would be as fast as lightning. As for Chasing Light, its speed was even faster, like a rainbow. Void Treading referred to walking on the void. It was almost as if one had flashed into the void. As for the highest level, the Astral Travel Secret Skill, it was the great accomplishment of the Divine Travel Secret Skill. After successfully cultivating it, the Astral Travel Secret Skill would allow the Astral Travel Secret Skill to travel freely in the void realms. As expected of one of the 10 great ancient secret techniques, it is truly profound. After he finished comprehending, Yiguchen sighed. Since he had the lightning sword Dao, it would be helpful for him to comprehend the first level of chasing lightning. The Holy Imperial Universe is finally opening. Yiguchen got up and walked out of the room. Outside the pavilion, the members of Sword Dynasty were already prepared. The auras of the 13 sword sons were piercingly cold and high-spirited. They were like sharp swords that had been unsheathed and emitted a sharp light. This battle was extremely dangerous. Of course, if he succeeded in the end, the rewards he would reap would be unimaginable. Everyone, today is the opening day of the Holy Imperial Universe. I hope you can return victorious. Confuzi encouraged. We will return victorious. Jian Jinghong and the others were excited. Yiguchen's expression was calm and composed. However, the flames of war were gradually rising in his dark eyes. In the Holy Imperial Universe, he wanted to settle things with some people. At this moment, within the holy city of good fortune, numerous floating ships rose into the air. The ships were packed with people. The teams of the major forces were all heading in the same direction. On the way to the Holy Imperial Universe, Yiguchen had asked out of curiosity why no one from the Overlord families had appeared. Confuzi explained that the 4 Overlord families each had their own opportunities in the land of ancestral ancestors. Therefore, they did not place too much importance on the opportunities in the Holy Imperial Universe. However, when the Burial Island opened, the 4 Overlord families would definitely appear. Yiguchen nodded slightly. The reason why he had asked this question was because, among his enemies, the Dongfang family was also one of his enemies. Furthermore, the destruction of the Su family had a lot to do with the Dongfang family. However, right now, Yiguchen's focus was still on the battle for the Holy Imperial Universe. After a period of time, Yiguchen finally saw the location of the Holy Imperial Universe. In the void above the sky, there was a huge space crack. Spiritual energy gushed out from the space crack. Celestial light bloomed. Various topographical features could be vaguely seen. It was like a paradise that was independent of heaven and earth. Is that the Holy Imperial Universe? A small world in the body of an immortal Saint Emperor. Yiguchen looked over. His heart was in turmoil. In the Jianghu where he lived in his previous life, the strongest cultivator could only split mountains and cut off rivers. However, in this world, the strongest could evolve a complete small world in their own body. What kind of supreme power was this? Immortal Saint Emperor? I will definitely reach this level. Yiguchen's eyes were burning with flames. His goal was to reach the peak of martial arts. The immortal Saint Emperor's world-creating power had deeply stimulated Yiguchen's mind. He wanted to become stronger. He wanted to dominate. He wanted to ascend to the immortal realm and destroy all his enemies. I must obtain the great opportunity in the Holy Imperial Universe. Yiguchen was determined. At this moment, countless ships were parked outside the space crack of the Holy Imperial Universe. Densely packed figures entered the space crack like locusts. They were afraid that they would be one step slower. Among these people, there were many geniuses with powerful cultivation. The geniuses on the Dragon Phoenix list were followed by a group of people. Those were their followers. After entering the Holy Imperial Universe, you must be careful. It's best not to provoke the geniuses of the Overlord forces. Also, we can watch the scene inside the Holy Imperial Universe from the outside, Confuzi said. Yiguchen looked around. Indeed, he saw the space crack outside the Holy Imperial Universe. Some powerful warriors were using their own methods. Many screens of light appeared in the void, reflecting the scenes in the Holy Imperial Universe. Some of the Overlord forces were also paying close attention to their geniuses. Even though they could not enter the Holy Imperial Universe and could not interfere with the battles inside, they could still feel at ease if they could observe in real time. Then Deans, we will go in now. Yiguchen cupped his fists. Then Jian Jinghong and the others entered the space crack. At this moment he felt many gazes on him. Sympathy, pity, indifference, watching a show, murderous intent, and many other emotions. Chu Xuanzhen, Chen Qingshao, Zhao Weihuang, Crown Prince Xingyang, Jiangsun Aojue, and many others entered at the same time. They all looked at Yiguchen coldly. There were two other figures who also wanted to enter. They were Dugu Qiuma and Princess Luoho. When Princess Luoho saw Yiguchen, she smiled coldly and said, "Dugu Bai, I still remember clearly what happened with the Sacred Dynasty's relic. I will make you pay for it in the Holy Imperial Universe." Yiguchen looked at Princess Luoho strangely. Princess Luoho put her arm around Dugu Qiuma's and said, "Qiuma, if you meet this Dugu Wubai in the Holy Imperial Universe, don't hold back." Dugu Qiuma raised his head and looked at Yiguchen in the void. The corners of his mouth faintly curled up into a smile. "Okay." Chapter 12:26. The Holy Imperial World was a small world evolved from the immortal Saint Emperor. The small world evolved from the body of such a powerful cultivator might not be comparable to a real world, but it was not far off. It was like a miniature world. As soon as Yiguchen stepped into the spatial crack, he felt the world was spinning. It was as if the world had been turned upside down. There were ripples in the void around him. In the blink of an eye, the world around Yiguchen changed its appearance. He landed on a desolate desert. The land was barren and the wind was strong. The sky was high and there were even suns and moons rotating in the sky. "Is this the Holy Imperial World?" Yiguchen looked around and exclaimed. It was not a real world, but it was no different from a real world. If some mortals lived here, they would not think that it was just a small world inside someone else's body. If that's the case, is it possible that the 9 regions are just small worlds inside the bodies of powerful cultivators? Yiguchen could not help but speculate, but he still shook his head. He did not think it was possible. The Holy Imperial World was large, but it was far from being comparable to the Nantian region, let alone the 9 regions. Finding opportunities is more important, Yiguchen said to himself. Jian Jinghong and the others were no longer around him. Clearly, when they passed through the spatial crack, the void was distorted and they were teleported to different places in the Holy Imperial World. But that was good. If they moved together, they would be safe, but the chances of finding opportunities would be much smaller. Plus, there would not be enough for them to share. Confuzi and the others said that the greatest opportunities in the Holy Imperial World are in the inner circle. I should be in the outer circle now, Yiguchen thought. After he confirmed the direction of the inner circle, he began to move. He used a strand of the power of the Thunder Sword to support the 9-colored Xian Thunder. As he moved, the 9-colored Xian Thunder twirled around his feet. As Yiguchen moved, he cultivated the first level of the secret skill of swift, chasing lightning. In just a breath's time, Yiguchen's figure moved like a thunderbolt and flashed 1,000 feet away. The divine movement secret technique is indeed extraordinary. I've only started cultivating the first level, but my speed is already twice as fast as the previous, so close, yet worlds apart. Yiguchen secretly praised. Then, he began to move in a certain direction. During this period of time, he also discovered people from other dynasties. When some of the dynasty forces saw Yiguchen, they immediately retreated. On the other hand, some people had crooked ideas. They believed that since Yiguchen could not use his genuine qi, even if he had a good physical strength, he would not be able to compete with them. Along the way, Yiguchen had encountered several such groups of people. In the end, they were all killed by Yiguchen. The competition at the Holy Imperial Universe was cruel. Apart from his own people, everyone else was his opponent. Therefore, Yiguchen did not hold back. 10,000 treasure crag, a sacred material? After killing another group of people, Yiguchen got a piece of information from this group of people. In the outer circle, there was a place called 10,000 treasure crag, which was full of underground caves. There might be sacred materials in it, which attracted many people's attention. Let's go and take a look. Yiguchen thought as he flashed away. He valued sacred materials very much. Because Yiguchen did not forget that he had inherited the taboo forging technique of the heaven forging edge. He could forge swords with his human soul and cultivate both sword and life. He also did not forget to forge a famed sword that completely belonged to him. And if he wanted to forge a weapon that would be comparable to a famed ancient sword in the future, the level of the materials needed had to be above sacred materials. Even the best materials for forging divine weapons of tribulation did not meet this qualification. Sacred materials were also very rare in the outside world. Every time they appeared, there would be a storm of blood. At this moment, at the 10,000 treasure crag in the outer circle, many geniuses were searching in and out of various underground caves. Killing was also a very common thing. From time to time, there would be whales. Some geniuses had died here, dyeing the 10,000 treasure crag blood red. Among the geniuses searching for sacred materials, there was a tall and slender woman. Her ink-black hair was tied up and fixed with a jade hairpin. She had a snow-white face and no makeup. She looked as if she had walked out of an ink painting, with a cold temperament. If Yi Guchen was here, he would definitely remember that this woman's name was Su Jiqing. Previously in the ancient Chaos Wasteland, Yi Guchen had met her, Yang Haoye, and the others. However, in contrast to Yang Haoye, Su Jiqing and Yi Guchen got along quite well. At this moment, Su Jiqing was also searching for various opportunities in the 10,000 treasure crag. Of course, she was not ambitious. She just wanted to find some supreme-grade materials to forge weapons. As for sacred materials, Su Jiqing did not think about it, nor did she dare to think about it. Su Jiqing was considered outstanding in the Cloud Billow dynasty where she was from. However, when she came to the Holy Emperor world, Su Jiqing realized that there were many geniuses in the Nantian region. She was nothing. Therefore, Su Jiqing did not compete with others. She only wanted to quietly search for her own resources. I wonder if I can find any supreme-grade materials in this cave? Su Jiqing entered another cave and began to search. She indeed found some extremely rare metals. Her beautiful face was filled with a faint smile. At this moment, she suddenly discovered that in the deepest part of the cave, there seemed to be a faint golden light seeping out from the cracks in the stone wall. Su Jiqing raised her eyebrows, puzzled. She stepped forward with the sword in her hand and broke the stone wall. Suddenly, a golden light shone brightly. In the void, golden divine patterns spread out. In the broken stone wall, there was a piece of gold about the size of a human head embedded in it. That piece of gold shone brilliantly, like a solid sun. There were various natural patterns on its surface. It was as if one could hear the chanting of scriptures. It made one want to sit on the ground and comprehend the Tao. Could that be the Daluo Tao metal? Su Jiqing was extremely shocked. She had only seen the Daluo Tao metal in the records of her family by chance. It was an extremely precious sacred material. It was said that it was the carrier of the Tao. That was why there were patterns on its surface. Even if it was just an ordinary weapon with a little bit of the Daluo Tao metal, it would contain the Tao and become a sacred object. This kind of Daluo Tao metal was extremely rare in the outside world. If news of it spread, even saints would be jealous. Su Jiqing did not expect that the Immortality Saint Emperor who created the Holy Emperor world would have something like the Daluo Tao metal. He had placed it in his own small world and became an opportunity. Her heart pounded. If this item was discovered by outsiders, it would cause a storm of blood in the Holy Emperor world. Without any hesitation, Su Jiqing used her sword to pry out the Daluo Tao metal. Even she could not resist the temptation of the Daluo Tao metal. At this moment, there was movement at the entrance of the cave. Someone was attracted by the golden light. Oh no! Su Jiqing's expression changed. Chapter 1227. Several dynasty prodigies walked into the cave and saw Su Jiqing putting the Zenith Heaven Tao metal into her origin ring. Is that the Zenith Heaven Tao metal? One of the dynasty prodigies rubbed his eyes in disbelief. It must be. That golden light must be the light emitted by the Zenith Heaven Tao metal. The other dynasty's prodigy was shocked, and his eyes immediately turned red. That was an extremely rare sacred material that could only be chanced upon. They didn't expect that they would encounter it. Without any superfluous words, the few dynasty prodigies charged forward with bloodshot eyes. If it were any other time, they might have modestly declined when they saw a beautiful woman like Su Jiqing. But if it was the Zenith Heaven Dao medal, they wouldn't hesitate to kill Su Jiqing. Su Jiqing gritted her teeth and charged forward with her sword. Her cultivation wasn't weak either. She had reached the second firmament of the divine dwelling realm. The moment he made a move, it caused the few dynasty prodigies to turn pale with fright. They didn't expect Su Jiqing to be so strong despite her weak appearance. Their strength was only at the first firmament of the divine dwelling realm. Su Jiqing didn't show any mercy. She knew that if she didn't attack ruthlessly and the matter of the Zenith Heaven Dao medal was leaked, she would be the one to die. Thus, Su Jiqing didn't show any mercy and pierced through the chest of one of the dynasty prodigies. Her other sword pierced through the head of another prodigy. However, at this moment, the last heavily injured prodigy fled towards the entrance of the cave with all his might. Die! Su Jiqing stabbed her sword with determination. Unexpectedly, that dynasty prodigy suddenly took out a hidden weapon. Numerous spirit-destroying flying needles shot out and stopped Su Jiqing. Because she was a step too slow, that dynasty prodigy walked out of the cave. Oh no! Su Jiqing's expression changed, and she stabbed her sword toward that dynasty prodigy's back. She has the Zenith Heaven Dao medal. That prodigy let out a roar that echoed throughout the surroundings. Immediately after, a sword pierced through that prodigy's chest. But many prodigies in the surroundings had already heard his words. Su Jiqing, who had pulled out her sword, was extremely pale. Go! Those geniuses were like jackals and wolves that had smelled blood. They surrounded Su Jiqing and attacked her without any hesitation. Su Jiqing fought back with all her might, fighting as she fled. Her white dress was stained with specks of blood, like peach blossoms. Blood flowed from the corner of her lips. Despair. Endless despair. There were more than a dozen dynasty prodigies chasing after her. And as the commotion spread, more and more people joined in. After hearing about the Daluo Dao gold, they all went after Su Jiqing with bloodshot eyes. In the Holy Imperial world, there was no such thing as showing mercy to women. In their eyes, the Daluo Dao medal was more important than anything else. Looking at the group of sky prides whose eyes were bloodshot like ravenous wolves, Su Jiqing felt helpless. It seemed like the only way to survive was to hand over the Great Firmament Dao medal. Just as Su Jiqing was about to hand over the All-Heaven Dao medal, a cold voice resounded. All of you scram. All the sky prides were stunned, and they couldn't help but stop in their tracks. Someone even shouted angrily, "Who is it?" In the distance, a figure appeared. Su Jiqing's heart skipped a beat. Was someone coming to help her? A figure in a golden robe with a golden saber in his hand appeared. Seeing this person, some of the sky prides were shocked and said, "It's Jin Taiji, the third on the saber roll of the Tyrant Saber dynasty." Fear appeared in many people's eyes. The third on the saber roll of the Tyrant Saber dynasty was definitely not weak. In the Holy Imperial world, as long as he didn't run into the sky prides of the Overlord forces, he could defeat anyone. Jin Taiji glanced at the crowd and finally fixed his eyes on Su Jiqing. He said coldly, "Hand over the Daluo Dao medal and I can spare your life." Hearing Jin Taiji's words, Su Jiqing's expression changed and she smiled bitterly. Jin Taiji was also there to snatch the Daluo Dao medal. In the cruel Holy Imperial world, it was almost impossible for one to stand up for an injustice. At that moment, another voice was heard. "Jin Taiji, the Daluo Dao medal belongs to us." Two figures, one male and one female, appeared. Their bodies were surrounded by specks of starlight that sprinkled down. It's Prince Xingliu and Princess Xingxuan from the Sky Star Dynasty. Many people were shocked again. Although the Sky Star Dynasty was ranked behind the Tyrant Saber Dynasty, they were backed by the Starry Sword Pavilion. The 4 Star Lords of the Starry Sword Pavilion and Gu Xiaoyang were in the Holy Imperial world. Therefore, unless they had no other choice, no one dared to offend the Sky Star Dynasty. When Jin Taiji saw the situation, he frowned and said, "With your strength, you are not qualified to say such words." "Oh, is that so? What if we want to give the Daluo Dao medal to the 4 Star Lords or young Master Xingyun?" Prince Xingliu sneered. The Celestial Star Dynasty had done this sort of thing many times before. Jin Taiji's expression turned fierce. Looking at Jin Taiji and Prince Xingliu, who were treating her like a fish on the chopping block, Su Jiqing felt bitter and helpless. In the Cloud Billow Dynasty, she was a genius and she was extremely dazzling. But in the Holy Imperial world, she was just a weak girl who was at the mercy of others. For some reason, at this moment, Su Jiqing actually thought of the young man she had met in the ancient Chaos Wasteland. That young man was now the famous Jin Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. Even though his spiritual dwelling had been broken, he had achieved amazing results in the martial arts tablet and attracted everyone's attention. What am I thinking? I'm afraid he has forgotten about me. Su Jiqing shook her head and smiled bitterly. She did not look for Yi Guqin when she was in the Holy City of Fate because she thought she was not qualified to come into contact with Yi Guqin. They were not on the same level anymore. Yi Guqin had probably forgotten about her too. At this moment, Prince Xingliu sized up Su Jiqing's appearance, and a wisp of surprise flashed in his eyes. He said, "Miss, if you hand the Daluo Dao gold to me, my Skystar Dynasty can protect you. Give the Daluo Dao metal to me." Jin Taiji was unwilling to give up such a sacred material. There was a hint of threat in his eyes. Su Jiqing bit her lips so hard that it almost bled. If she gave the Daluo Dao metal to Prince Xingliu, Jin Taiji would not let her go. If she gave it to Jin Taiji, Prince Xingliu and the others would not let her go either. Su Jiqing was stuck in the middle. No matter who she gave it to, she would die in the end. I asked you to give me the Daluo Dao metal. Did you hear me? Or do you want me to scratch your beautiful face? Princess Xingliu was a little impatient and she threatened. Don't be like this. Miss, if you give the Daluo Dao metal to me, not only will I protect you, I can even make you my concubine. Prince Xingliu smiled faintly. Judging from his tone, it was as if it was an honor to be his concubine. How dare you? Jin Taiji's expression was cold. You are going too far. Su Jiqing's face was pale and she bit her lip until it bled. Just as Su Jiqing's heart was about to be drowned in darkness and despair, an indifferent and calm voice sounded. It's really lively here. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.